RMC, Ian, is a formidable mage, able to bend the elements and even command darkness. He wields such terrifying force that with just a flick of his hand he reduces enemies to cinders. But it was not always like this. His past life was cut short by a car, and his next one began as the son of a penniless farmer. In this grim medieval world, he was a total null. The system coldly tagged him as an empty slot. No one spoke to him. Everyone gave him a wide berth. Then everything took a sharp turn when he crossed paths with Elidis, a true mage. She tracked him down because of some dusty prophecy about black hair and took him on as her apprentice. She brought him to her manor, and that's where the real grind began. He devoured magic tomes, then threw himself into mastering the 4 elements. He nearly drowned in icy rapids, plummeted from dizzying heights while taming the wind, and almost burned alive while learning to command fire. And now he sets out for the final trial, the trial of Earth. He attempts to reason through Earth's nature with Moronius, trying to define how something that seems still might still flow. When nothing answers, his confidence falters and he wonders if he has misunderstood the mystery. He concludes that he may simply lack enough affinity for Earth magic. Rather than force it, he decides he should strengthen his other abilities first. At that moment, a status window appears and reveals bonus skill points that can raise his magic proficiency. Ian is delighted, realizing this system gives him an overwhelming advantage in this world. Unable to read every detail but understanding the function, he chooses to spend the points on leveling his elemental skills, including geomancy. The upgrade takes effect at once, and magical energy surges through the cave as his connection deepens. Earth finally answers him by revealing the truth below. Beneath the ground, stone is not still at all, but floating over a sea of lava. Deep in a cave, Ian realizes the trembling around him is geomanic power and understands he has just heard the Earth itself. Deciding he has learned enough, he prepares to return and report that he can perceive the Earth's voice. Before leaving, he uses fire magic to solve the immediate problem of the darkness. A torch flares to life in his hand, giving him a way forward through the cavern. The sudden light draws a furious cry from something hidden, revealing that another presence has been lurking in the dark. Startled, Ian demands to know who in the earth is speaking to him. The unseen presence answers only faintly, too weak or unwilling to explain itself. The scene shifts back outside under the night sky as Ian hurries to share what he discovered. He heads straight for his master, intent on reaching the next Pyromancer Council with this breakthrough. He calls out to her urgently as he runs up, eager to deliver the news. His master immediately understands he succeeded in the trial she sent him on. Ian proudly announces that he has learned shadow magic from the darkness. That claim shocks his master, because it is not what she expected him to gain at all. Ian waits confidently, unaware that his wording has created a serious misunderstanding. His master silently connects his claim to the forbidden idea of a voice of darkness, and grows alarmed. Seeing her reaction, Ian checks on her, confused by her sudden unease. She calls him by name to steady herself, and he answers cautiously. Rather than explain, she tells him it is time for them to go down the mountain. Ian agrees to leave but presses her to explain what is really going on. She makes clear that this is where they separate, turning the moment into a farewell instead of a shared departure. She directs him toward the north to seek out the Space-Time Mage Council on his own. Her reasoning is that if his destiny truly lies with space-time magic, he will find someone there who can guide him. Ian is blindsided, because the decision comes without warning and seems to overturn everything at once. Trying to soften the shock, she playfully ruffles his hair instead of giving him a fuller explanation. Privately, she reflects that Ian has an extraordinary affinity, and that his talent may be better suited elsewhere. She concludes that he will eventually be able to command time itself, even if he does not understand that yet. Having made up her mind, she ends the conversation before Ian can argue further. She parts from him with a promise to meet again in Dranhelm 3 years later. By the next day, Ian has accepted the situation enough to focus on practical travel plans. In town, he hears merchants and travelers calling out their wares as he moves through the busy streets. Now dressed for the road, he makes his way through the market while thinking over his master's abrupt decision. He can only conclude that her choice was sudden and characteristically impossible to predict. Then he overhears a recruiter calling for anyone heading north, mentioning a caravan bound near the Space-Time Sorcerers Council. With no better lead, Ian decides he might as well follow that route and see where it takes him. That choice brings him to a nighttime camp where merchants and travelers are gathered before continuing north. Ian settles by the fire with a bowl in hand, quietly taking in the unfamiliar group. A friendly merchant named Leek, master of the Rabbit-Foot Merchant Guild, starts a conversation by asking if this is Ian's first trip north. Ian admits it is and explains he joined because business on that route came up suddenly, prompting Leek to ask whether he knows about Dragon Mountain. The mention of Dragon Mountain leads into a warning about the place, where dragons are said to dwell. Leek emphasizes the danger by describing real drakes appearing there, making the northern road sound far more perilous. He then asks Ian whether he can fight or at least dodge well enough to survive such trouble. When Ian hesitates, Leek bluntly judges him useless in a brawl and asks what role he can possibly fill. Ian nervously reveals the truth that he is a mage. That answer stuns Leek, who had completely failed to recognize him as one. The claim also catches the attention of a hooded traveler nearby, and the mood around the camp subtly tightens. From beneath the hood, the silent traveler studies Ian with sudden interest. The others around the fire echo the surprise, clearly unsettled that the quiet newcomer is a mage. Ian notices the tension and asks if there is some problem, not understanding why his identity changed the atmosphere. Leek hurriedly brushes it off and overcompensates with forced cheer, offering Ian another serving to smooth things over. Still unconvinced, Ian watches as Leek abruptly retreats toward another dark-clad man, sensing there is more behind the camp's reaction than anyone wants to admit. The young traveler realizes the man nearby is actually a mage. At the campfire, the mercenaries dismiss that possibility and mock him as weak. Their contempt deepens as they compare him to a stray dog and make clear they do not respect him at all. A hooded young woman quietly approaches the traveler with a suggestion. She urges him to put the mercenaries in their place if he truly is a mage. He hesitates, and she explains that staying meek will only make these hired men look down on him. According to her, he needs to display enough power to frighten them into backing off. She adds that once he does, they will protect him no matter what happens. That logic catches him off guard, but he starts considering it seriously. He admits she is right, yet has no idea how to act intimidating when anger has never come naturally to him. While he wrestles with that problem, one mercenary keeps eating by the fire. The man casually spits onto his wooden dish as if that were normal. Seeing that, the traveler is instantly revolted. The mercenary notices the sudden oppressive mood and jokes nervously about the ground shaking. He looks up and realizes the mage's fury is directed entirely at him. The traveler finally finds his anger and explodes over the spit on the plate. The mercenary immediately loses his nerve under that pressure. He throws himself to the ground and begs forgiveness, calling the traveler Master Mage. His excuse is that he was only trying to clean the plate. The traveler snaps that water exists for washing and vents his disgust without restraint. The mercenary protests that the available water is filthy. That answer only shocks the traveler even more. The man explains that the water is full of mud and insects, so he sees no problem with using spit instead. That warped standard of cleanliness leaves the traveler speechless. For a moment, he can only dwell in horror at how unhygienic this world is. Even the mercenaries are baffled by how seriously he is taking this. The traveler bitterly reflects that medieval hygiene is worse than he imagined while the others wait on edge for the mage's next move. Deciding to make use of the moment, he chants an incantation. The campfire responds at once, surging violently under his control. Flames whip upward and lash toward the mercenaries, proving his power beyond doubt. The men recoil in alarm as the ordinary fire becomes something unnatural. Even the hooded woman is stunned by the display. Still furious, the traveler orders them to bring water immediately. As the mercenaries scramble in panic, he keeps raging at their filth while inwardly marveling at how angry he has become. Later, the camp is left behind in the night. Elsewhere in the forest, a group of rough men tracks the hooded woman, certain she fled this way. One of them is pleased at the thought of claiming Kathy for himself this time. Before long, they spot her. Thinking they have cornered an easy target, they approach with false friendliness and try to lure her along. One of the men quickly senses something is wrong. A masked stranger suddenly appears carrying the woman over his shoulder, revealing she is no longer alone. The pursuers are startled and demand to know who he is. Before they can react properly, one of them is struck down. The others realize their companion has been killed and accuse the stranger of murdering him. They rush him together, intent on killing him in return. The masked man dismisses them as weaklings while keeping hold of the woman. The woman, hanging upside down against his shoulder, is startled by how abruptly the fight is unfolding. He shifts his grip and moves through the attack without letting her fall. In the next instant, he drops low and brings another enemy down. When the motion stops, the woman is left shaken on the ground while her rescuer remains poised beside her, ready for the rest. A blue-haired woman flees through the night as armed pursuers close in, and the hunters are ordered not to let their target escape. Elsewhere, a young mage lies asleep in a tent, unaware that the chase is nearing him. A warning breaks into his sleep, telling him that there is no time left to rest. He jolts awake as a supernatural alert reaches him. Humans are coming. The unseen voice urgently forces him fully conscious before the danger arrives. Still disoriented, he sits up in alarm and tries to understand the threat pressing in on him. As he steadies himself, he senses an unfamiliar presence nearby and realizes something is wrong outside. Someone calls for the mage, making clear that others are already depending on him. An older man bursts in and reports an immediate problem, dragging the mage into the crisis. Under the full moon, the night outside feels tense and exposed as the danger draws closer. In the forest, masked men clash with defenders while the pursuit of the woman continues amid the fighting. One attacker cuts down a man without hesitation, showing the search party is willing to kill freely. Their leader makes it clear that the dead do not matter as long as the woman is found. He orders his men to stop wasting time on the fight and focus entirely on locating her. The woman hides behind a tree, shaken, while armed searchers spread through the area around her. Cornered and panicking, she realizes they are about to catch her and sees no way out. A sword suddenly appears at her head, ending any hope that she can stay hidden. A silver-haired pursuer finds her and calmly confirms that her escape is over. He threatens to maim her if she does not stand and submit immediately. Certain she is about to die, she gives in to despair. Before the man can finish her, a burst of power interrupts the attack and forces his strike off course. The attacker freezes in shock as he realizes something unexpected has intervened. A violent surge erupts around the woman, blasting the assailant away and breaking the moment of capture. The mage appears beside her in swirling magic, placing himself between her and the hunters. She stares at him in disbelief, struggling to process that someone has come to save her. He quickly reaches for her, making his protection immediate rather than symbolic. With calm confidence, he tells her to stay close to him and takes control of the situation. Though still frightened, she begins to look at him with fragile hope. The villagers gather behind the mage and the rescued woman, forming up around his lead. They announce that they are ready, showing they will follow his plan despite the danger. He accepts their support and prepares to act, while the woman remains close behind him. The mage invokes darkness, choosing a spell meant to change the battlefield itself. Shadow spreads overhead and across the forest, swallowing the moonlit clearing in unnatural gloom. Raising his hand, he completes the spell and blankets the area in magical darkness. The enemy is caught off guard as visibility vanishes around them. Confusion breaks through their ranks when they realize they can no longer see anything and must rely on torches. They hastily light flames, trying to reclaim control of the field. Instead, the darkness turns them against one another, as their shouted directions only deepen the chaos. Using the confusion, the mage leads the woman and villagers forward in a tight line through the dark. As he keeps moving, he activates a shadow-based vision skill that lets him navigate what others cannot. The pursuers hear movement nearby and panic, sensing their prey slipping away in the dark. One of them lunges toward the sound, desperate to stop whoever is escaping. The older villager breaks under the pressure and begs for mercy, revealing how terrified the group is. The mage answers by switching from concealment to attack and calls forth scorching fire. A blast of flame engulfs an enemy, turning the torchlight against the hunters themselves. The burning man collapses, and the ambush leaves the attackers reeling. Two masked pursuers hesitate at the sudden counterattack, no longer certain they control the hunt. The mage judges that the fire should keep them back long enough to continue the escape. But the enemy quickly regroups, identifies that a mage is among them, and orders everyone to charge. One masked fighter surges forward with renewed determination, showing the pursuit is far from over. A giant drake suddenly looms over the group, turning the night into an immediate life-or-death crisis. The armed escorts freeze as they recognize the threat and realize they may already be outmatched. The villagers are overtaken by panic as the monster's appearance confirms their worst fears. The young mage stares in shock, struggling to process that such a creature is really in front of him. The drake reveals itself fully, wounded and bloodied, but still terrifyingly powerful. One guard tries to hold his ground despite the fear, while the drake's presence presses in on them. The beast lashes out fast enough to send the men scrambling, proving it can kill them whenever it wants. The others finally identify it as a drake, and that recognition only deepens their dread. The mage quickly understands how dire the situation is. Facing the drake's killing intent, he becomes convinced he may die here. At that moment, a system message appears, declaring that he has witnessed a primordial mystery. Caught off guard, he focuses on the strange interface that only he seems able to see. The message explains that a skill has activated, granting him sight even in total darkness. As the drake studies him, the mage realizes the creature may be tied to the same mysterious phenomenon. That thought leads him to suspect the drake itself might be one of those mysteries. His mind flashes back to earlier encounters with inexplicable powers as he searches for a way to survive. He compares this event to the other mysteries he has experienced, trying to find a pattern he can use. Remembering how absurd and dangerous those encounters were, he steels himself to gamble on that connection. Shaking with fear, he decides to act on that possibility anyway. The drake growls at him directly, forcing him to commit before his courage fails. With the villagers cowering behind him, the mage becomes the only one left to confront the monster. The drake bears down on him with open hostility, making clear that one wrong move will end everything. He forces himself calm and decides he has to try. Drawing on his power, he prepares to stop the drake before it can attack. He starts his desperate attempt by addressing the creature directly. Instead of threatening it, he blurts out that he is the drake's friend. He doubles down on the claim with frantic gestures, begging the drake not to fight and trying to signal peace. The drake hesitates, no longer attacking immediately, as if trying to understand him. The onlookers realize the beast may actually be listening, though none of them can make sense of it. Seeing the pause, the mage holds steady and waits to see whether his gamble worked. He struggles to interpret the drake's response, frustrated that he still cannot understand its meaning. A new system prompt offers him a way forward by spending points to improve the relevant skill. He decides without hesitation to invest everything if it means staying alive. The system confirms that his summoning skill has increased. Almost immediately, he realizes he can now hear the drake's voice in a comprehensible way. He cautiously addresses the creature again, testing this new connection while the others cling to him for safety. The drake's reply crashes into his mind with overwhelming force, proving the link is real. Relieved, he recognizes that the upgrade worked and that communication is finally possible. He gathers himself, knowing he now has one chance to turn this into negotiation. He formally tells the drake that he has no intention of fighting it. The drake answers through the mental link, noting that ordinary speech would have been blocked by the forest's air and warning that they are standing on dangerous ground. The villagers can only watch in confusion as it becomes obvious that some kind of telepathic exchange is happening. Even the girl beside him is left speechless by the impossible conversation. The Drake bluntly states that if he truly means no harm, he should leave instead of forcing a confrontation. Encouraged, the mage realizes the negotiation is succeeding at least enough to keep the Drake talking. But the Drake's tone shifts, signaling that the situation is not resolved. It suddenly roars that if he really intends to fight, he should come at it properly, turning the exchange back into a challenge. Behind him, the villagers break down, terrified that the fragile peace is collapsing. The mage curses inwardly, realizing he still does not know how to get everyone out alive. He understands the Drake's demand as a dismissal to leave, but also realizes that if retreat fails, he may have no choice except to face it. Determined to confront the dragon directly, Ian addresses the creature known as Mr. Drake. When the dragon mocks his audacity and asks why it should tell a human anything, Ian steps forward anyway. He calmly claims he may be able to offer the dragon some useful assistance. The dragon dismisses him as an arrogant brat and insists a mere human has nothing it needs. Instead of backing down, Ian quietly begins invoking mystery magic. A strange magical current stirs through the forest and gathers around him. The onlookers tense in alarm as the atmosphere abruptly changes. The dragon notices the shift and pauses to reassess the boy. Ian reveals himself within a swirl of luminous power, making it clear he is no ordinary traveler. Now intrigued, the dragon stops sneering and starts paying attention. Ian presents himself as a humble seeker of mysteries and says he can offer something the dragon will appreciate. That measured confidence makes the dragon hesitate instead of rejecting him outright. Sensing an opening, Ian decides to test whether he can win the dragon over. As the night wind moves through the trees, he turns inward to plan his approach. He realizes brute force is impossible and that persuasion is his only path. Ian admits to himself that he is out of options and must rely on whatever he can do. Remembering that mysteries can be handled like people, he decides to figure out this dragon's preferences rather than make impossible demands. A memory of his mentor surfaces and gives him the key idea he needs. He recalls being taught that mystery magic works through communication, so building rapport with a mystery is essential. That lesson emphasized that every mystery is different and must be understood on its own terms. The principle was simple. Whether a mystery becomes friend or subordinate depends on understanding what it responds to. With that in mind, Ian decides to play to the dragon's nature and manipulate its mood instead of confronting it head-on. He summons his all-purpose skill window to search for a practical method. The answer appears in a manual on mastering summoning arts. Ian seizes on it immediately, convinced he has found the breakthrough he needs. He focuses and reads for the crucial detail. The guide's first recommendation is unexpectedly simple: offer strong alcohol, scaled to the creature's size. Ian is thrown by how crude the advice sounds, but he keeps going because he has nothing better. The next instruction is even blunter: flatter the target shamelessly. He is baffled that this counts as summoning wisdom at all. Even so, he accepts that he cannot overpower the dragon and must exploit any weakness he can find. Ian concludes that since direct control is impossible, he needs to create an opening through the dragon's ego and appetites. He politely interrupts, drawing the dragon's attention back to him. Ian announces that he has prepared a gift and asks permission to present it. Curious and amused, the dragon agrees to receive it. Ian immediately turns to one of the merchants for help. He orders Mr. Leek to fetch every bottle of the strongest alcohol from the wagon at once. A crate is brought over as Ian puts his plan into motion. Inside is a supply of liquor, enough to make a proper offering. The dragon initially scoffs at the gift as pitifully small for a creature of its size. Ian counters that in the human world, rarity and value matter more than sheer quantity, trying to reframe the offering as refined rather than meager. He pours the liquor into a mug, preparing it carefully for presentation. Then he offers the filled drink to the dragon with deliberate confidence. The dragon recoils at the smell, suspicious that Ian may be trying to poison it. Its hostility surges again as it openly accuses him of plotting something. To calm that suspicion, Ian cheerfully promises it is safe and offers to drink first as proof. He downs the mug himself without hesitation. The watching humans stare in shock, unsure whether he is brave or reckless. Ian forces a smile through the burn and insists the drink is fine, though the strength nearly overwhelms him. Seeing that the liquor is genuine, the dragon's suspicion eases and its interest shifts toward the potent scent of the offering. The mage offers a dragon a drink, assuring him it should suit his taste. The dragon cautiously accepts the tiny mug, unsure what to make of this human gesture. He sniffs and tests the strange liquid instead of trusting it outright. Nearby villagers watch in anxious suspense, clearly terrified of how the dragon might react. After tasting it, the dragon's expression sharpens with interest rather than anger. When asked for his judgment, he admits it is not especially good, but he immediately adds that, for some reason, it is oddly addictive, catching the mage's attention. Encouraged, the mage eagerly offers another bottle, and the dragon quickly warms to the idea. The night passes under a calm moon as their drinking continues. Before long, the dragon is openly guzzling the alcohol with shameless enthusiasm. He ends up genuinely loving the drink, while the mage dryly accepts the absurd success of his brew. By the time the villagers notice the aftermath, the dragon has emptied 7 barrels without passing out. The mage realizes simple intoxication will not put the dragon to sleep and starts rethinking his approach. Since the alcohol itself is failing, he concludes there must be another weakness to exploit. The dragon reminds him of an earlier question, steering the conversation toward the real reason for his foul mood. He confirms that his bad temper began with a personal grievance rather than random violence. The mage is startled when the dragon unexpectedly starts speaking with vulnerable sincerity. The dragon confesses that his nest was too small and uncomfortable. He had once shared it with a girlfriend who found it cozy, making the memory even more painful. The mage is stunned that this fearsome dragon even had a romance at all, but listens on. The dragon reveals that the relationship ended without him understanding what he had done wrong. He explains that everyone began mocking his girlfriend. Because she was dating someone like him, he was consumed with guilt. In a burst of drunken anguish, he admits he broke up with her over it. The villagers overhear this melodramatic confession and are left bewildered by the turn of events. The dragon's heartbreak erupts into a loud, miserable wail that shakes the whole clearing. The villagers are knocked out cold by the shock of it, leaving the mage as the only one still dealing with him. Watching the dragon collapse into lovesick despair, the mage realizes pity may give him leverage. He quickly decides to turn that opening into a bargain. Calling the dragon by name, he makes sure he has his full attention. He offers to use magic to repair and improve the dragon's nest. The dragon, caught off guard, immediately wants to know if the offer is real. The mage confirms it is, but only if the dragon agrees to a condition. With a confident smile, he asks for one small favor in return. By the next day, the crisis has moved from negotiation to whatever agreement was struck. The mage stands in the forest afterward, looking as though the consequences are already weighing on him. The villagers slowly wake from their collapse, confused and groggy. One of them drifts into a dazed, inappropriate misunderstanding until the mage cuts it off. Something large and close by makes its presence known, interrupting any chance of normalcy. The mage snaps the old man back to his senses with a threat, forcing him to focus. He faces the source of the disturbance with grim intensity, ready for the result of his deal. The villagers jolt fully awake as the situation suddenly becomes impossible to ignore. A heavy impact and frantic movement reveal that someone or something has been dropped into their midst. The newcomer turns out to be a blue-haired young woman, disoriented, while the old man stares in baffled recognition. As the mage leads the group away in a cart, the others struggle to understand how everything changed while they were unconscious. He explains that while they were out, the dragon roared, everyone fainted, and events moved on without them. When asked whether the dragon has come to his senses, the mage avoids the question, implying the matter is not settled. The frightened villagers wonder if the dragon is waiting to devour them, but the mage denies it. He reveals the truth instead. The dragon is waiting for him, because he made a deal to save their lives. The blue-haired woman seizes on that revelation, demanding to know what kind of deal he made. Ian realizes the villagers are praising him as a great mage for subduing the drake and worries he may have done more than necessary. He reminds the drake that he only agreed to heal its nest if the captives were released, making clear the bargain still stands. Before Ian can settle matters, the villagers erupt into worshipful cheers and start hailing him as their savior. Caught off guard by the sudden commotion, Ian turns in confusion to see what they are doing now. Their praise becomes so excessive that even Ian recognizes it has gone from gratitude to embarrassing hero worship. The drake, overwhelmed by the noise and attention, can only endure the barrage as Ian waits for the uproar to die down. By the end of it, the villagers celebrate Ian as the man who forced the fearsome drake to submit. Their relief spills over into open jubilation as they convince themselves he has completely conquered the beast. They go further and pledge their lives to Ian, treating him as a figure of destiny, while he can barely process what they are saying. Ignoring the devotion being thrust on him, Ian tells them to get ready to leave while he goes back for the drake's nest and warns them not to depart without him. An older man reassures the group that Ian and the drake are effectively on the same side now, leaving Ian awkwardly accepting the misunderstanding. As the villagers begin organizing themselves, a blue-haired girl calls out to stop them and asks for a head count first. She suddenly senses something unusual and grows alert, as if noticing a presence or disturbance nearby. Her attention shifts upward into the forest canopy, following the faint sign that caught her notice. The scene moves to the drake's cave, where Ian returns to deal with the damaged nest. Inside the cavern, Ian pauses as the drake looms beside him and the tension between them resurfaces. The drake snaps at his expression, and Ian hurriedly insists he is not mocking it, only worn out and unable to hide it. Ian admits his mana and stamina are nearly depleted, showing that the earlier fight and healing have pushed him close to his limit. Even so, he decides to finish the job by reshaping the cave walls and clearing the jagged stone around the nest. He steadies himself and prepares to cast despite his exhaustion. Ian invokes earth magic to begin repairing the cavern. As the spell stirs, the earth itself answers him again, signaling that the mysterious force tied to his magic has returned. Ian tries to ask that power for help, but it immediately rejects him and refuses to cooperate. He can only bitterly note that whatever governs the earth clearly dislikes him. The drake checks on his progress, and Ian explains that the earth keeps refusing his requests, making the repair harder than it should be. He resigns himself to the idea that the earth will probably flare up and reject him again. The drake bluntly confirms that if the earth refuses him, there is nothing he can do about it. Ian falls silent, struck by the implication. The drake reflects that if the earth rejects Ian, then perhaps Ian was never truly loved by the world in the first place, despite trying to believe otherwise. Ian quietly addresses the drake, shifting the conversation away from magic and towards something more personal. He asks the drake's name, and introduces himself properly as Ian here this Raven. The Drake answers that he is Drake Longtail and unexpectedly offers friendship. Ian repeats the name and accepts the gesture by reaching out his hand. The human and Drake seal their new bond with a handshake. That bond immediately manifests as a new ability, giving Ian the power to summon Drake Longtail as an ally whenever he calls. Ian is relieved to have gained the skill but feels guilty that he still has nothing to offer his new friend in return. Before he can dwell on that, Drake calls his name to get his attention. To celebrate the friendship, Drake reveals his hoard and invites Ian to take as much treasure as he wants. Ian realizes the Drake's former master must have had an obsession with collecting jewels, because the cave is overflowing with them. He picks up a gem and laments that if the earth were not so hostile, he could have simply asked it to repair the nest directly. Then a new idea hits him as he stares at the jewel in his hand. He remembers that if the earth hates him, he might be able to work around that hostility by using an offering instead. Drake catches on enough to tease him for sounding greedy. Ignoring the jab, Ian places the jewel within a magic circle on the cave floor. He recalls a lesson from his master and realizes this is exactly the kind of situation that technique was meant for. If the mystery of his magic is still incomplete, then he can compensate by presenting the gem as a gift through a ritual circle. Ian decides to test the method at once, while Drake remains skeptical and urges him to move on if it fails. With renewed confidence, Ian activates the spell and calls for the summon. The unseen power responds with amused disbelief, assuming Ian intends to summon some being for its sake. Ian answers with dry laughter as the force mocks him for thinking he can summon anything at all, leaving the outcome hanging. A blue gem activates with overwhelming magical force, as if opening a path or triggering a summoning. The magic spirals into a tunnel of glowing runes, pulling the process forward at high speed. That force crashes into a rocky chamber, striking with enough impact to shake the surroundings. A blinding burst erupts, announcing the arrival of something powerful. A dragon-like creature notices the disturbance and immediately turns wary. Its eye sharpens with alarm as it realizes the source is heading straight toward it. The creature confirms the incoming presence is approaching their location. Inside a vast hidden sanctuary, the impact reaches what appears to be the dragon's secluded home. A young man in a blue cloak appears there, and both he and the dragon are stunned by the encounter. He takes in the enormous ruin around him and realizes he has landed somewhere astonishing. The dragon, distracted by a delicious scent, becomes more curious than hostile. It assumes the newcomer must have created that enticing smell with magic, but the young man denies knowing anything about it. Misreading the situation as a gift, the dragon gratefully seizes him like a treasured offering. The creature's thoughts veer into absurd affection and possessiveness, while the young man is crushed by attention he never asked for. Still rattled, he awkwardly tries to be polite, hoping to calm the dragon by saying he is glad it was pleased. Before he can recover, he feels something strange happening beneath him. Confused, he tries to understand the sensation, while the dragon watches just as uncertainly. The feeling intensifies, leaving him dizzy and unable to make sense of his own body. The dragon leans in, questioning why he still seems half asleep and unresponsive. A sudden realization hits him, and his expression turns grim. He loses consciousness on the spot and collapses. The dragon catches him in panic, calling his name and trying to keep him from hitting the ground. With Ian limp in its grasp, the dragon is left scrambling over what to do next. It shouts for help, desperate for someone who understands magic. A purple-haired woman rushes in at once, responding to the emergency. The dragon startles at her sudden arrival, caught between relief and alarm. She quickly assesses the scene and realizes the dragon is in distress over the unconscious stranger. She finds the dragon cradling Ian protectively rather than attacking him. The dragon carefully adjusts its hold, trying not to hurt the unconscious boy. But when the woman gets too close, the dragon bares its teeth and warns her off. She immediately backs down and pleads with Drake to listen, trying to calm his protective instincts. To save herself and Ian, she hurriedly declares that she and Ian are the dragon's friends and begs not to be harmed. She pushes the reassurance further, asking for the dragon's agreement in the simplest possible terms. Drake hesitates over the idea that Ian could truly count as a friend. As the woman waits tensely, Drake's aggression fades into reluctant acceptance. With the danger eased, Ian remains slumped and unconscious in the aftermath. Time passes into night as the crisis settles into uneasy quiet. Only the dim candlelight inside the chamber marks the stillness around them. Ian finally begins to stir awake, groggy and disoriented. Still half dreaming, he reaches out expecting to find his phone and ordinary reality. Instead, his hand closes around someone else's hand. Too dazed to process it, he absurdly assumes his phone has somehow turned soft. The unfamiliar warmth and softness make him compare it to a cat's paw, deepening the confusion. When a voice asks if he is awake, the shock snaps him fully alert. He looks up to find his head resting in the lap of the purple-haired woman. Startled and embarrassed, he demands to know why she is here. She gently tells him to stay down because he is clearly confused, while he wonders if he is still dreaming. As he tries to sit up anyway, she scolds him for moving too fast after blacking out. Holding his head, Ian remembers that he passed out during the chaos. He pieces together the cause. He had tried to talk with a noblewoman, but the effort of forcing his summoning art to level up overwhelmed him and led to this collapse. The young woman hesitates in confusion, while Ian realizes the situation has suddenly become awkward. The hooded dragon awkwardly curls up in embarrassment, making it clear Drake has fled the scene out of personal excitement. When Ian asks where Drake went, she explains he abruptly left without warning. Ian quickly infers that Drake probably ran off to reunite with his mate, and the thought is absurdly easy to picture. That realization leaves Ian mildly stunned by how delighted Drake seemed about it. Trying to reset the mood, Ian apologizes for the trouble, but she assures him she is unharmed. She then asks how Ian even got there, and he admits he only told Drake he was her friend, which was enough to make the dragon bring him along. Ian starts to explain the method in terms she would not understand, and her blank confusion makes the gap between them obvious. Still half asleep, Ian realizes he almost answered in modern jargon that means nothing in this world. Before he can smooth it over, she quietly confesses that she followed him despite knowing it was dangerous. Gathering herself, she tells Ian there is something important he needs to know. She reveals that the attack the night before happened because of her. Ian is caught off guard when she takes responsibility for the entire incident. Ashamed and trembling, she asks whether he is shocked that she dragged him into her troubles. Ian feels the conversation turn heavy and tries to think of how to handle her distress. Seeing her shaking, he first assumes she is overwhelmed by guilt and fear. Her tearful expression confirms how deeply this confession is weighing on her. Ian tries to lighten the tension by joking that if she were truly involved with criminals, she would not look this frightened. His teasing lands just enough to make her pause, and he openly admits she does not seem like a bandit at all. She decides to trust him with the truth, beginning by correcting the false name she had given him. Ian braces for something dramatic, and the reveal sounds almost too grand to be real. She introduces herself as Lucy of the Italian family, a noblewoman rather than an ordinary traveler. Lucy explains that the bandits were not random attackers but men sent by her fiancé to abduct her. Ian is baffled by how casually she can mention a fiancé after everything that has happened, but he listens as she continues. Lucy says she had been trying to flee so far away that her fiancé would never find her. She recalls that even after running, his reach still seemed to close in on her from above. Desperate, Lucy takes Ian's hand and pleads with him directly. She asks him to help her escape, forcing Ian to stop and confront the full weight of her request. Instead of agreeing immediately, Ian asks the crucial question of what exactly she is running from. Lucy begins with her family's status, explaining that the Italian house governs the Fine-Leb region as a barony. Because their military strength was too weak to protect that land, her family lived under constant threat from outside enemies. In the end, that vulnerability led them to seek survival through marriage rather than force. The memory shifts to the wedding that was meant to secure her house's future. Lucy was betrothed to a former mercenary captain whose power and influence seemed capable of protecting her family. At the time, his command of the strongest mercenary group made him look like a practical answer to their weakness. At first he appeared respectable enough to be accepted by both her family and society. He seemed content with becoming the male heir through marriage, and Lucy had little reason to resist openly. She even tried to meet that arrangement with composure, believing it might remain bearable. But once he secured his position, his restraint shattered and his ambition turned openly abusive. He began using the authority gained through the engagement to gather power around himself. With that power came cruelty, as he openly pursued other women and treated Lucy as if her feelings did not matter. When her parents finally moved to break off the engagement, they did not survive the decision. The memory drives Lucy into fury and grief as she names him for what he is. She reveals that her fiancé poisoned her parents. Ian is stunned by the scale of the crime she has been carrying alone. Lucy explains that he learned her parents intended to cancel the engagement, so he murdered them to silence them and preserve his claim. Ian absorbs the revelation and realizes just how monstrous the man truly is. In his mind, the fiancé becomes nothing more than a vicious opportunist hiding behind noble ambition. Lucy adds that even if he was born a commoner, he cannot inherit the Italian name or fortune without her. That is why she fled with the help of loyal servants, determined that death would be preferable to being taken back by him. The woman fears her pursuer will keep hunting her down until he can force the marriage. She begs Ian to get her away safely before that can happen. Ian realizes she is trapped by a prince who wants to use her family's poison magic for his own power. He understands the prince has already ruined her life and left her desperate enough to flee. Even while taking this in, Ian is baffled by how twisted noble logic can be. She tries to secure his help by swearing the Talon family's honor and promising a reward worth his time. Ian hesitates, wondering why she chose him and whether helping her would only invite betrayal. She dismisses that fear by revealing the prince values her life so little that the bounty on her head is laughably cheap. That answer makes Ian pause and reconsider what kind of situation she is really in. When she claims she can give him everything, Ian is caught off guard by how far she is willing to go. She makes her offer explicit, promising him the throne itself if that is what he wants. The sheer scale of her proposal leaves the two of them facing each other in stunned silence. Ian's thoughts jump to the implication that marrying her could make him king. He imagines the path from commoner to royal consort opening in front of him. For a moment, he sees himself becoming Ian Elidus Raven. But he checks himself, reminding himself that he is just a former laborer stranded in a fantasy world, not someone meant for a crown. So instead of chasing that fantasy, he decides the practical thing is simply to help her escape and then part ways. As he starts to answer, she waits anxiously for his decision. Ian downplays his value, insisting she would be better off hiring a swordsman because a mage is not really a frontline fighter. She takes that as rejection, and her hope immediately starts to collapse. Seeing her wilt, Ian quickly moves to stop the misunderstanding. He agrees to help after all, as long as she is paying, while making it clear whatever follows afterward is her responsibility. To her, that answer feels like rescue at the exact moment she needed it most. Relief overwhelms her, and Ian is startled when she suddenly breaks down crying. He awkwardly tries to reassure her that he really did mean he would help. She answers by clutching his hand in gratitude. Still crying, she thanks Ian over and over for saving her. Her gratitude turns into an impulsive embrace that leaves Ian frozen. Caught in the hug, Ian quietly absorbs how serious and sincere her desperation is. He lets her cry against him until the moment settles into a fragile sense of trust. By the next bright morning, their escape is underway. Nearby, a dragon-like creature lounges in the sun with complete ease. The beast notices them and casually acknowledges Ian like an old acquaintance. Ian approaches with the woman behind him, and the creature greets him as a friend. The dragon checks on Ian's condition, and Ian assures him he is fine. Ian urges them to head down the mountain because the rest of the group is waiting. He also thanks the dragon for the gift from earlier, brushing it off when the thanks are returned. To speed things up, the dragon offers them a ride. Ian accepts easily and addresses the creature by name, Longtail, treating him with familiar affection. Watching this, the woman is left baffled by how naturally Ian interacts with the dragon. Longtail notices her hesitation and bluntly orders Princess Epton to climb on as well. Ian lightly scolds Longtail for scaring her, but the dragon sees nothing wrong with his approach. The princess can only admit that she has no idea what either of them is talking about anymore. Seeing her confusion, Ian reaches out to guide her. With an encouraging smile, he tells her to get on Longtail's back. She accepts his hand and lets him help her up. Once both riders are seated, Longtail announces their departure. The dragon launches forward, carrying them down through the forest at speed. As they race on, someone ahead urgently calls for everyone to move because there is no time to waste. They arrive to find survivors in turmoil, with one man insisting the mercenaries they had seen were completely wiped out. A villager panics that if the bandits are still nearby, everyone in the village is doomed. Another man tries to stay reasonable and insists they should deal with the threat properly instead of giving in to fear. The villagers argue that with no one but old men left, they have no way to fight off raiders who steal food and women. Unable to decide, they turn to their elder, Master Leek, and press him for an answer. Leek sits in heavy silence, weighing the village's desperation. A sudden realization strikes him. He abruptly decides they should wait for the mage instead of confronting the bandits themselves. The others split between outrage and eager agreement, with one immediately ready to follow Leek's lead. Leek justifies himself by saying they only need to hold out until the mage returns and can drive the raiders away. Ashamed, he bows and admits the village was attacked by bandits, and that he should have endured the humiliation if it were only about him. A one-eyed bandit leader cuts off the villagers' whining and asserts control through open intimidation. With a blade at their throats, the villagers beg for mercy and offer anything to save themselves. The bandit leader names his price and demands they hand over a woman. He makes clear he means a striking woman with blue-black hair and warns them not to pretend ignorance. The villagers slowly realize he is talking about the beautiful outsider among them. They identify her as Kathy. The others are stunned that he means her. The bandit leader orders his men to find Kathy at once while the villagers are left shaken. Before they can act, Kathy vanishes from where she had been. The bandit leader understands immediately that she slipped away and takes it as confirmation. Terrified, the villagers cling together and cry for help. The bandits notice something approaching and pause to identify it. The villagers realize the mage has returned and that he has brought a drake with him, giving them sudden hope. The bandit leader is thrown off by the mention of both a mage and a drake. The drake charges into view at full speed. Ian arrives riding the drake, with Kathy safely behind him. The bandits recognize Kathy and begin to grasp what they are facing. Their confidence breaks when they realize the creature she is riding is truly a drake. The beast's presence confirms the danger beyond doubt. One bandit freezes in raw fear. The leader abandons all bravado and orders an immediate retreat. Relieved, Ian tells Kathy he is glad she is safe. Leek thanks Kathy for being with the mage and admits the bandits would have done something terrible to her. The villagers then wonder how those men knew about Kathy so quickly and note that they had been lurking around from the moment the newcomers arrived. That mention makes Ian focus on a familiar name tied to the village's supposed faith. Hearing the name Marquis after so long stirs an old memory in him. He recalls a church orphanage where children were raised under the heavenly God and where he once lived. Ian reflects that even after all this time, the people connected to that place are still hounding Lucy. Watching Kathy, he realizes they are relentlessly pursuing her. As the fleeing bandits continue shouting Lucy's name, Ian understands they may eventually catch her if nothing changes. He turns to the drake, Longtail, and asks for help. Ian asks Longtail to drive the men away, promising he can explain everything later. Longtail agrees on the condition that Ian properly introduce him to Lucy afterward. The drake immediately races off to chase the bandits away. Left behind, Ian thinks he never wanted to rely on Marquis's power again, but he may have no choice if he wants to protect her. That thought jolts him with the fear that he may have drawn on that power once more. He clutches his head, wondering if he overused Marquis's power again. Kathy notices his condition and gently asks if he is pushing himself too hard, but Ian insists he is fine. She stays close and makes clear she does not believe him, while Leek watches the two of them with sudden interest. Leek seems to arrive at a new understanding as he studies them. A bystander mistakes the mage and his hooded companion for a couple, putting him on the spot before he can deny it. Later, they ride on in uneasy silence while he tries to act casual, and she sits close beside him. His attention snaps back when a new report interrupts the lull. The system informs him that his Drake has killed yet another human, already the 11th victim. He accepts the report without surprise, making it clear he has been expecting this outcome and sees no reason to interfere. He calmly confirms that the deaths are intentional. The truth behind the report is shown. The Drake is slaughtering armed pursuers who had been hunting them. Rather than condemn it, he acknowledges that the Drake protected them and quietly appreciates that loyalty. The Drake brushes off the bloodshed as trivial if it helped its friend. As they part, the mage realizes the Drake is leaving for good. The Drake explains that a long-lived creature like him cannot remain in these mountains forever. He adds that this may be the last time they ever meet, turning the farewell into something final. The mage thanks him sincerely for everything, and the Drake accepts the gratitude with warmth. Before going, the Drake remembers one last thing he wants to leave behind. He offers a feather as a keepsake and asks the mage to remember him by it. The story then moves to Riverville, where the pair arrive after leaving the mountains. In town, locals quickly notice the hooded girl and identify her as a phoenix. That rumor spreads with a dramatic retelling of how a phoenix supposedly appeared to save people from a Drake. The tale grows into a grand legend about the phoenix, a rare bird of endless azure. The embellished version claims its feathers carry frost that freezes whatever they touch. It is further named the Ice Phoenix, making the creature sound even more extraordinary. The rumor elevates it into one of the highest-ranking magic beasts of the Storm Mountains. Hearing all this, the mage wonders whether he could now summon such a creature himself. Before he can dwell on it, townsmen hurry over to address him as a mage. They warmly invite him to join a local meeting being held in honor of the phoenix. He reflects that Lucy escaped safely, but the city still seems to be treating her as a noblewoman rather than an ordinary traveler. The men also invite Kathy along, assuming she belongs with him if she has nowhere else to go. Kathy is caught off guard by being included so naturally at his side. To settle the matter, the mage casually declares that the two of them are heading to an inn together first. That wording makes the men realize he just implied they are staying together, and they are stunned. Kathy blushes at the implication even as she remains tucked under his arm. She leans into him and plays along, acting tired so she can stay close without protest. Watching them, the older man becomes convinced his suspicion was right all along. He happily concludes that the two really are together. Elsewhere in the crowd, another observer notices them with a more measured interest. As they walk away, Kathy questions why he keeps presenting himself as an ordinary person when he is clearly a mage. He explains that he is only copying the humble manner of his master, who always hid his greatness behind the image of a common farmer. For him, it is not an act with some deep scheme but a way of being approachable and respectful to others. Kathy listens, quietly taking in that this modesty is genuine. She then asks what he plans to do next. He says he intends to visit Count Katina, his late mother's brother, because family ties may persuade the Count to help. Kathy awkwardly admits those family ties were not especially warm, even if they were not openly hostile. He points out that relying on a distant uncle is risky if they were never truly close. Kathy counters that in the city there is no one more trustworthy than him, so she wants to take that chance. He accepts her judgment and decides that if she believes in the Count, he will trust that choice. She reassures him that the Count is still far better than a stranger, especially since many people would only pursue her for her noble status. Then, with a teasing smile, she adds that if someone as impressive as him proposed, she would not mind at all, and he immediately dismisses the nonsense. He cuts off the flirtation by reminding her their arrangement ends once they meet Count Katina, while she keeps pressing the joke. Trying to shut it down completely, he tells her there are plenty of other men in the world. That answer only leaves Kathy visibly annoyed and jealous instead of discouraged. A weary pair arrives in town, with the young woman pushing ahead while her companion tries to keep up and make sense of her urgency. They head straight into an inn, seeking shelter as soon as they can. Inside, they are received as ordinary travelers and step into a brief moment of safety. The young man secures a room for several nights and asks for baths, showing they intend to recover here rather than move on immediately. He pays without haggling, wanting the arrangements settled quickly. The innkeeper accepts at once and moves to prepare everything. A careless question about whether the hooded young woman will bathe too turns the practical request into an awkward personal matter. Flustered, she tries to deny any issue, but her panic only makes the implication worse. She pushes back by pointing out that he is filthy too, trying to drag him into the embarrassment with her. When he still fails to understand, she snaps and makes it clear that she should not have to explain such an obvious problem. Her frustration leaves him genuinely confused for a beat. The sight of the bath setup finally makes him realize the problem. There is no privacy at all. That realization hits him all at once. Trying to fix the situation, he tells the innkeeper to prepare a bath only for him, sparing her the exposure. She admits that this is exactly the issue, embarrassed that he needed so long to understand. Their exchange has already drawn the attention of the other patrons, turning private discomfort into public spectacle. He notices the room watching them and understands how exposed they have become. As he tells her to put her hood back up, she insists on being called Kathy, signaling that hiding her identity matters more than his familiarity. He hurriedly helps cover her again, anxious because everyone is staring. Once her face is hidden, he can only resent how troublesome the whole situation has become. At a nearby table, several men grin at what they have seen, their interest already turning predatory. Outside, the scene shifts from awkwardness to danger as those men begin talking about the woman they just saw. They are captivated by her beauty and speak of her less as a person than as something rare they have discovered. Seeing that she travels with only one young man, they judge her poorly protected and easy to take. Their talk hardens into a plan to abduct her, and the others quickly agree. The threat is left hanging, but it is clear they do not intend to let the travelers leave peacefully. They decide they must seize her that very day. Elsewhere, the story moves to a noble estate where another kind of danger is being managed through politics rather than force. Lord of Riverville Baron Kalitz orders a servant to investigate the source of local trouble and report back. The servant gratefully accepts the chance, eager to earn favor. As he withdraws, he thinks about how useful this assignment could be for securing his place in the castle. He suddenly realizes he can exploit what he knows about a mage to gain even more advantage. He immediately asks permission to share something important with the Baron. Pretending reluctance and loyalty, he frames the information as a secret he can no longer keep from such a worthy lord. The Baron indulges the flattery and invites him to continue. The servant claims that during his travels he encountered a mage, presenting the revelation as first-hand knowledge. He embellishes the tale with dramatic details, describing how that mage supposedly saved them all. Then he pivots, hinting that the real point is not admiration but danger. He reveals that this same Drake-using mage is now in town and brands him a dangerous threat. The accusation jolts the Baron out of his complacency. He immediately grasps the political risk. If a Drake and a mage are operating in his territory, his authority could be questioned. His fear escalates as he imagines the destruction such a figure could bring. In his mind, the threat becomes a disaster scene of fire, panic, and a Drake rampaging through helpless townspeople. He convinces himself that this is no ordinary problem and that only a stronger power can deal with it. That thought leads to the Holy Order of Santiago, a militant religious force. They are introduced as zealots who combine martial strength with faith and define their mission as destroying demons and monsters. They present themselves as humanity's righteous protectors, giving the Baron a ready-made authority to call upon. If those Santiago Knights become involved, the situation will no longer remain local or quiet, and the target of that intervention is the young Drake-using mage himself. The danger closes in as armed knights confront him directly, placing him one step away from open conflict. A nobleman is jolted into alarm by some sudden report. He erupts from his seat in outrage, immediately taking the matter seriously. A court attendant answers him with formal obedience, waiting for orders. The nobleman commands that a room be prepared for a particular man. He also orders Tiago to be summoned at once, deciding the unstable mage will be easier to handle through him. Elsewhere, morning breaks over the city as the search for that man begins. At an inn, Ian and the hooded Lucy quietly eat while the room around them remains unaware of the danger closing in. A customer complains about the delay, putting pressure on the overworked waitress. The waitress admits she is behind and has not even finished preparing the bathwater yet. Ian steps in to take care of the bath himself, and Lucy worries about interrupting his meal. Before leaving, Ian tells Lucy to go upstairs once she finishes eating, and she agrees. Lucy keeps eating, apparently complying with his plan, but a man in the inn watches her closely and realizes she is now alone. He quietly makes his move. Lucy leaves her seat and heads down the corridor by herself. The man stops her by grabbing her arm under the pretense of politeness. He immediately tests whether she is the hooded girl connected to the black-haired man who just stepped outside. Lucy recoils and demands to know who he is. He claims he is merely a servant hired by that man. To prove it, he shows her money and says he was sent to bring her to the docks right away. He adds a lie about an incident during the bath preparations to make the story sound urgent and believable. Lucy remembers the men hunting her and realizes this could be another trap. The man presses her to come immediately, and despite her hesitation she starts to follow. A sudden noise interrupts the moment, and breaks the smoothness of the abduction. The nearby door shifts open, exposing the corridor to the outside. The man bolts, and Lucy chases after him instead of being led away. Then she spots something unexpected and stops in shock. Outside, Ian is calmly tending the boiling bathwater, exactly where he said he would be. The supposed servant lunges at Lucy, dropping the act now that his lie has been exposed. Her scream carries across the yard. Ian hears Lucy call for him and instantly turns alert. The moment he realizes she is in danger, his attention snaps fully to her. An attacker tries to strike Ian from behind before he can intervene. Ian evades the blow and counters fast enough to throw the ambusher off balance. The first attacker crashes to the ground, stunned by how easily Ian handled him. Ian quickly understands this is organized and suspects Lucy's fiancé may have sent them. More men appear beyond the fence and urge each other on, confirming the trap is larger than one thug. Ian gauges the situation, realizing Lucy is being moved while he is being stalled. Another man blocks his path and tries to keep him from going after her. Annoyed, Ian recognizes he has already lost precious time because of this interference. Power begins to gather around him, changing the fight completely. The thug freezes as he notices the strange force swirling through the air. Ian draws in the surrounding mana and prepares to use a spell he has been avoiding. As the magic brightens, eerie voices answer him and tempt him to use the moment for their amusement. Those unseen entities eagerly urge him to play with his enemies. Ian recognizes the voices as the darkness tied to his power. He invokes shadow arts, calling that darkness into the open. The attackers are suddenly engulfed by unnatural shadow and panic as their vision disappears. While the thug cowers blind in the dark, Ian remains standing over him in complete control. Ian coldly reveals the rule of his magic. Inside his shadow arts, he alone can see. As several men close in, someone ahead desperately begs for mercy. The young mage realizes the captive he cornered must have summoned backup. He keeps the frightened man pinned under threat, refusing to let him escape. Demanding answers, he presses the captive to reveal where the missing girl was taken. The man suddenly claims he can see again, trying to derail the interrogation with panic and excitement. Irritated by the evasiveness, the mage strikes him and orders him to answer properly. Before he can continue, the mage senses danger and turns sharply. A sword is thrust toward his back, forcing him to recognize that armed men have surrounded him. An older swordsman arrives with authority and halts the confrontation before it escalates further. The mage immediately connects these newcomers to the darkness he sensed earlier. The elder, leader of the Holy Order of Santiago, questions whether that darkness was the mage's doing. The boy admits it was and identifies himself as the one who summoned that darkness. The elder studies him in silence, taking the measure of someone so young wielding such power. He is struck by the contradiction between the boy's age and the impossible force he displayed. The captive seizes the chance to beg the order for protection. He accuses the mage of attacking him without cause and trying to kill him. To the mage, the man's lie is so blatant it feels almost monstrous. The elder accepts the claim with unsettling calm instead of outrage. He reasons that if the boy is a mage, then violence is only to be expected. The pause that follows makes clear the order is treating the accusation as confirmation, not evidence to examine. The mage challenges that logic and demands to know what exactly they think is inevitable. The elder answers with prejudice, implying that cruelty is simply the nature of mages. He expands that belief into doctrine, declaring that mages bend all things to their own will. The accusation infuriates the boy. The men around the elder echo the same contempt, reducing all mages to monsters. The mage tightens his grip on his staff and rejects their absolute nonsense. He fires back that he attacked only because this man was one of the kidnappers and he had every reason to intervene. For a moment, the crowd is thrown off by how directly he says it. The mage realizes he lost control of the exchange by shouting and that the elder may seize the initiative if he draws his sword. Instead of anger, the elder responds with amused curiosity. He praises the boy's sharp tongue as the mark of a gifted mage, turning even defiance into proof of his bias. One of the order's men steps forward and names the supposed crime, vile magic. The mage repeats the term, trying to understand what they are condemning. The man explains that vile magic means any art that blinds people to the light of heaven. He frames magic hidden in shadow as a corrupt and disgraceful act. The boy cuts through the rhetoric and asks whether darkness is condemned simply because it rejects the sun. The man insists that anything opposing the light of heaven must be evil by definition. The mage pauses just long enough to gather his argument. He counters that if light is called providence, then darkness must also belong to the same natural order, because night exists only where heaven's light does. Pushing harder, he argues that darkness is merely the absence created by light itself, so condemning it as unnatural makes no sense. His opponent falters, unable to answer the logic directly. The surrounding men begin to waver as the argument exposes the weakness of their certainty. One of them quietly shifts, sensing the tide of the exchange turning. Then the group abruptly rallies behind dogma anyway, loudly declaring that even this contradiction must still be heaven's will. The mage is left staring at the absurdity of arguing reason with fanatics. The elder finally changes the subject and asks to be excused, saying he now needs to go find the kidnapped girl. The captive is horrified as the elder reframes the situation. The boy attacked him because he was one of the kidnappers. Under the order's cold gaze, the man realizes his lie has collapsed and tries to deny it. The elder orders his men to keep watch over the captive, effectively treating him as a suspect now. He then turns to the young mage with sudden courtesy and apologizes for having wasted his time. An older man offers his hand and frames his approach as an apology, trying to lower the tension. At sunset, a small boat waits at the dock as two men prepare to leave by river. Ian and several villagers rush toward the pier, determined to stop the escape. They identify the boat as the one the witness mentioned, confirming they have found their target. The pursuers realize the suspects are fleeing by water and erupt in anger. Ian quickly judges that the setting sun makes a boat pursuit impractical and starts looking for another way. A sudden idea strikes him as he studies the river. The older man notices Ian's shift in focus and presses him for his next move. Instead of panicking, the elder rallies the others with a grand call to protect the named soul and launch the boats. The villagers answer with zeal, invoking the Order of Saint Santiago and turning the chase into a righteous mission. Ian realizes they are fanatics, though he privately admits that protecting the weak is at least admirable in principle. He tries to warn the elder that boarding a boat is dangerous, but the man's stiff politeness only frustrates him. When told to speak normally, the elder insists he already is, making the exchange even more awkward. Meanwhile, one man in the boat reveals he found a hook and plans to snag the vessel to pull it in when signaled. The elder is startled that Ian intends to drag the boat back from shore. Ian explains that he can use hydromancy despite having only completed entry-level training. The elder finds that impossible, since entry-level students should only know basic magic. He questions whether Ian should even be able to cast anything yet, exposing how abnormal Ian's talent is. Ian answers by calling directly to the river and forcing his power into action. A massive current rises over the dock, leaving the elder and the others stunned by the scale of it. The river surges violently and overturns the fleeing boat in one overwhelming sweep. Watching the display, the elder realizes Ian's hydromancy far exceeds anything he showed in battle. The men in the boat panic as the current seizes them and they lose control. One of them turns in confusion, unable to understand what force has caught them. The boat is thrown hard enough to leave both men reeling in shock. Their escape ends with the vessel flipped uselessly against the dock. With the crisis over, Ian withdraws while the villagers move in to secure the captives. Before he can leave, a young woman crashes into him, calling him Ian and clinging to him in tears. The elder dryly points out that the girl he rescued is now all over him, and Ian can only endure it. Up close, her trembling and tears make clear how much fear and hardship she has endured. Ian quietly accepts her sobbing embrace and lets her calm down against him. He sighs, resigned to being trapped in the emotional aftermath. Later, Ian reflects that he knew they needed to wash away the grime of the fight, though he had no idea what that would lead to. That thought gives way to the absurd reality of finding peace in a bath in this world. Elsewhere, riders race through town under emergency orders, clearing the streets. Word spreads that the eldest son of the Lord of Riverville is hurrying to the scene because his younger master has been found alive. As smoke from Ian's bath rises into the evening sky, it is mistaken for the aftermath of another battle. One rider warns that the Lord's fears may be coming true. Another grimly concludes that whatever happened must have been severe enough to overwhelm even the young master. The escort steels himself for the worst as they approach. At the bath, Ian casually asks someone to scrub his back, treating the situation with ridiculous normalcy. Surrounded by attendants, Ian thanks them cheerfully from the tub while steam pours upward like a signal fire. The commotion draws urgent attention from outside. The arriving pair burst in expecting disaster, and instead find Ian calmly bathing in the courtyard. Ian answers their alarm with complete indifference, as if taking a bath explains everything. The newcomers are outraged that this is what caused the emergency. They protest that Imperial citizens almost never bathe except on special occasions, making Ian's behavior seem bizarre and suspicious. Seeing the improvised bath and the disorder around it, the younger arrival becomes convinced something serious must still be happening. He declares that as the Lord's eldest son, he is entitled to a full explanation. Ian, still in the tub, is told to explain everything in detail to the furious brothers. An elder stops the young lord and asks to explain the situation himself. The boy rejects being brushed aside and insists the answer should come from the person involved. When he learns the stranger is a mage, his suspicion sharpens immediately. The elder realizes the boy is about to turn the accusation into a public test. The boy declares that if the man truly belongs to the mage race, he should prove it on the spot. An explanation follows that mages were once ritual performers whose magic was displayed like a sacred dance. Over time, that tradition hardened into contests of magical power. Eventually the spectacle became so violent that no one could mistake it for mere performance anymore. From the bath, the accused man realizes they expect him to demonstrate that old tradition. Instead of complying, he flatly refuses. His refusal shocks the accuser into disbelief. The boy erupts, treating the refusal as proof of guilt. He tries to force obedience, but the man coldly makes clear he has no reason to submit to a child's demands. The boy orders a guard to drag the supposed fraud out immediately. An elder intervenes, warning that the bather is no ordinary pretender and should not be handled recklessly. The accused man accepts that they have chosen hostility. He repeats the insult back at them, and his power begins to surge. The onlookers freeze as the air around him turns unnaturally violent. With a command, he raises the wind itself to answer for him. The gusts whirl through the area hard enough to lift objects and drive everyone back. The guard immediately backs down and apologizes, admitting they have seen enough to know he is genuine. The storm drops the scattered debris once the challenge is settled. Unbothered, the mage relaxes in the bath as if the matter was trivial. The boy, meanwhile, ends up restrained and humiliated by his own side. The mage dismisses the whole incident and turns his thoughts to a more important meeting ahead. The next day, the story shifts to a grand estate. There, a noble host welcomes the mage for accepting his invitation. He also acknowledges that his son caused trouble the previous day. The mage waves off the apology, treating the boy's behavior as childish excess rather than a true offense. The host notes that the mage had been traveling with a companion and asks whether he came alone. The mage worries about Lucy, but the host assures him she is being kept safe and well protected. Satisfied for the moment, the mage lets the matter rest. The host then asks the mage to identify his master, and learns the name Elidus. That name leads him to ask whether the mage's master had gone west toward the magic academy near the cliffs of Dreld. He is surprised that the journey was not instead directed toward Valgar or the Roxland Duchy. When the mage presses for an explanation, the host admits the political climate has grown tense. He reveals that Valgar appears to be setting its sights on Roxland. The implication is stark. war may be coming. The host asks whether the mage himself is traveling south as well. The mage says no, explaining that he is heading east to investigate a mystery. Hearing that, the host decides he has something useful to offer. The mage repeats the warning about Valgar and Roxlin, recognizing the seriousness of the situation. The host presents a large chest as his answer. He tells the mage to open it. The mage cautiously lifts the lid. What he sees stops him cold. Inside is a rare staff once used by a renowned aeromancer. The host identifies it as the Windwalker, and the mage recognizes the name at once. He reaches out and takes hold of the staff. With the Windwalker in hand, he is told that the weapon suits him perfectly. Ian examines the staff he has been given and concludes it looks ordinary, though he still appreciates the gesture. Even if the gift seems unimpressive, receiving it lifts his mood. When the elder asks whether he likes it and frames it as a reward for Ian's service, Ian accepts it politely and with gratitude. He resolves to value the gift as he leaves the grand building behind. That calm moment is broken when someone urgently calls for Ian. Ian rushes to the voice and demands to know what has gone wrong. A young woman tells him the situation is dire and clearly needs immediate attention. Before Ian can make sense of it, she grabs him and pulls him toward the problem. The crisis turns out to be a crow trapped inside a cage, pleading desperately for help. Ian is baffled that all this urgency is about a crow, while the girl treats it as something important. Others explain that the hunters caught the bird that morning and intend to eat it, but the girl has been interfering to stop them. She excitedly declares that Ian is the bird's destined savior and insists this meeting must mean something special. Ian meets her enthusiasm with silence, unconvinced by her talk of fate. She doubles down anyway, convinced destiny has brought Ian and the crow together. Ian apologizes to the hunters for her behavior and tells them to go ahead, making it clear he wants no part of her fantasy. When she protests, Ian shuts her down and reminds her that he is the mage here, not her. The hunters take that as permission and move to prepare the crow for lunch. At that moment, Ian suddenly hears the crow beg him directly for rescue. He immediately stops the hunters, startling everyone in the room. Ian confronts the crow, and the bird desperately repeats its plea for help. As the others remain unable to understand any of this, Ian realizes he alone can hear the creature's words. He suspects the crow cannot understand him because his magical ability is still too weak. The crow keeps begging frantically, terrified that Ian will let it die. Its non-stop pleading finally gets on Ian's nerves. Ian snaps that he already agreed to help, demanding the crow calm down. The crow immediately quiets and watches him carefully. Ian notes that even if the bird cannot understand his language, it can still read his intent well enough. When the hunters ask whether Ian was talking to the crow, he casually confirms that the bird was asking for help. The girl is thrilled that her hunch was right and takes this as proof she recognized something special about the crow. The elder humors her claim of mystical insight, while Ian privately recognizes that she is getting carried away again. Ian treats the crow's injury and carefully wraps its wounded wing. Once the bandaging is done, the girl assures him the bird should recover quickly. She asks what they will do with the crow now, and Ian first suggests returning it to the hunters. But he immediately rejects that idea, knowing it would only send the bird back to be eaten. As if sensing his hesitation, the crow climbs onto his hand and clings to him. It begs not to be abandoned and insists the people here are terrifying. Its desperation leaves Ian exasperated but unable to ignore it. With a resigned sigh, he lets the crow settle onto his shoulder. The girl asks if that means they are taking it with them, and Ian agrees for the time being, at least until they can decide what to do. She immediately decides that if the crow is staying, it needs a name. She proposes Obsidian because of its dark feathers, while Ian notices she is becoming absurdly attached to the bird. Ian shortens the idea to Oberon, and she happily accepts the change. He formally gives the crow its new name, and the bird seems content with it. Oberon responds with bold demands for offerings and continued service, which Ian takes as a sign that the bird is already feeling secure. With the crow's situation settled for now, the girl raises a more practical concern about traveling with the knights. She argues that joining them would be safer than continuing alone with just the two of them. Ian has to admit the knights' strength would make them effective protection. He recognizes that even bandits would hesitate to attack a group guarded by such fighters. Still, he worries that the knights may not be heading in the same direction they are. Sensing Ian's concern, the elder approaches and asks what is troubling him. An older man warns that leaving a young woman alone with the mage is risky, immediately framing him as someone to be handled carefully. He tries to secure the mage's cooperation by proposing a deal instead of making a demand. The man explains that he and his order are on their way to Katina's manor to hunt a monster. The mage is caught off guard by the mention of a monster and presses for clarification. A brief pause hangs in the room as the subject turns serious. The mage asks whether the creature they mean is a manticore. The beast is presented as a terrifying predator, confirming the danger of the mission. Its nature is made clear, a man-eating monster that survives by slaughter. Once the old man confirms it, the mage immediately suspects he is being recruited to help capture it. The old man denies any intention of dragging him into direct danger. Still, he hints that the mage's help would be welcome if offered voluntarily. The mage weighs that answer in silence instead of accepting the trap outright. He starts to pull away from the conversation, ready to refuse. He bluntly declares he is out, forcing the old man to stop him and clarify the offer. The old man explains that he is not asking the mage to join the hunt itself. He reveals that his order was founded by the Church of the Heavenly God, giving the request a religious and political context. With that authority behind him, he carefully lays out the real problem. When the order announced its mission to capture the Manticore, trouble arose before the hunt even began. Local priests pressured a mage into assisting them. The old man believes that mage is understandably offended, so he wants someone else to smooth things over first. He argues that another mage would be better received than a knight, and the proposal starts to sound reasonable to the young man. The mage concludes that if all he has to do is calm an angry colleague and secure magical protection, the risk is manageable. He agrees to travel with them on that basis. The journey begins under surprisingly easy conditions. As they travel, the mage finds the knights to be decent company rather than oppressive escorts. For a while, the trip feels almost completely free of stress. Only later, around the campfire, does he find something worth complaining about. One of the knights singles him out with eager attention. That knight enthusiastically invites him to study scripture together. The others pile on, trying to recruit him into a shared religious lesson. The mage refuses flatly, baffling the overly earnest group. Privately, he admits religion itself is not the issue. He just cannot handle how aggressively they push it. The old man finds his refusal unfortunate and draws the mage into a more serious conversation. He tells him that if he could hear the voice of God, he might have become a cleric of the order instead of an ordinary mage. That idea catches the mage's attention and sparks a dangerous curiosity. He starts wondering whether speaking to God could explain why he was reincarnated into this world with a status window. Before he can sink too deeply into that thought, the scripture-loving knight approaches him again with a book in hand. The mage, now interested for his own reasons, asks to see the religious texts after all. The knight eagerly sits beside him and shares the scriptures. As the mage reads, his bird familiar suddenly presses close, as if sensing something unusual. The woman beside him dozes off while he keeps reading by the fire. Out of nowhere, a voice praises his posture. He reflexively answers the compliment before realizing no one nearby should have said it. The knight looks confused and insists he only commented on the mage's posture, not anything stranger. The mage panics because he is certain he heard a different voice speaking directly to him. He realizes the voice did not sound human at all. The mysterious speaker addresses him again, confirming the contact is real. The knight reacts in alarm as the mage abruptly rises, shaken by what he is hearing. The unseen presence challenges him by asking whether it sounds less than human. The mage blurts out the conclusion he has reached: the voice belongs to a god. A mysterious presence answers his desperate call with uncertainty, leaving Ian unsure whether anyone is truly there. Ian immediately fixates on the unseen being, demanding to know why it singled him out. His frustration spills over as he accuses that power of dragging him into this world and confronting him through a strange window-like vision. He presses for an answer with open anger, refusing to let the silence stand. For a moment, the divine presence feels close enough that Ian believes he has finally reached it. But the connection vanishes as abruptly as it came, leaving only the knight around him. The others by the campfire can only watch as Ian reels from the sudden disappearance. Stunned, Ian realizes the being he was confronting has simply left him behind. That realization snaps his disbelief into outrage. He lunges after the absent god in fury, and the people around him have to physically restrain him. His outburst turns the camp chaotic as everyone tries to calm him and understand what set him off. Afterward, Ian throws himself into the scriptures with obsessive intensity, determined to force another encounter. His relentless study bewilders the others, but he keeps going until it finally produces a result. He gains a new divine skill that allows him to converse with the supreme ruler of this world. The system even congratulates him by name, confirming that his effort succeeded. Instead of comfort, the reward feels like mockery, as though his punishment has only changed form. The divine guidance makes its terms clear. If he wants God's attention, he must study more and deepen his devotion. It also reveals the absurdly grand image this world holds of its ruler, making the whole arrangement feel even more ridiculous to him. Ian bitterly concludes that the god who granted his skills has been toying with him all along. He imagines himself as nothing more than a puppet dropped into this world for the creator's amusement. That thought hardens into resentment as he pictures the god controlling his fate from above. Still, he accepts that his only path forward is to use divine arts until he can confront that being directly. So he resolves to learn more and search for a way to continue the conversation on his own terms. He decides that means finding more believers and gathering whatever influence or points he needs. With that new objective in mind, he looks up at the sky and commits himself to action. By morning, the story shifts from divine frustration back to the dangers of the world around them. A violent clash erupts in the forest as armed men are cut down in rapid succession. An older swordsman proves overwhelmingly skilled, carving through attackers before they can overwhelm him. One enemy collapses badly wounded, showing how decisively the fight has turned. The elder checks on a mage during the aftermath, making sure his ally survived the skirmish. Ian confirms that Lucy is with him, presenting her as part of his side. He explains that he brought her because she can identify all of the children caught up in this situation. Once the fighting settles, Ian and Lucy make sure the elder himself is unharmed. The old man brushes off concern with humor, refusing to act frail just because of his age. Ian praises his ability, and the elder reveals that he was once a mercenary. He adds that he was famous in his younger days, hinting that his current skill is only a remnant of what he once was. He explains that his reputation earned him the title Elder because too many fools kept challenging him. Ian immediately connects that fame to his own plans, wondering whether a well-known name alone can attract followers. The surviving soldiers celebrate the victory over the bandits, lifting the mood. Their cheers confirm that the immediate threat has been dealt with. Attention turns to pursuit when a soldier reports that the road splits ahead. He explains the choices. East leads to the Count's castle, while west goes into the forest where the manticore appears. The elder identifies the western route as the one leading to the mage's home. He urges Ian to move quickly, treating the next step as obvious. Ian stops him, realizing they should not all continue together. He decides Lucy should go ahead to meet the first mage, and afterward they can regroup at Katina's place. Before sending her off, he checks whether she can manage the trip alone. Lucy answers with playful confidence, insisting she is capable and will reach the destination quickly. She parts from Ian warmly and heads off on her own. As Ian watches her leave, he can only hope she reaches the mage safely. The young mage decides he has to finish up quickly and catch up with the woman they are pursuing. An older companion notices his familiar is gone and learns the bird has already gone ahead to follow her. With the trail already underway, they confirm they are about to meet the mage they have been seeking. The older man abruptly asks whether the boy is mentally ready, catching him off guard. He warns that mages are troublesome and that there is no telling how a Holy Order sorcerer might behave. When the boy asks why they are handling the Holy Order's mess at all, the older man hesitates. He struggles to admit the real reason. The answer is embarrassingly simple. They took the Holy Order's money, so now they have to do the job. The boy is unimpressed, having expected the Order's knights to look more dignified than that. The older man brushes it off and promises at least that the boy probably will not die. The boy silently decides that, whatever happens, he will never trust this man again. Ahead, eerie green magic coils around a cottage hidden in the woods. Dead vermin and birds around the place make it clear the magic carries a toxic presence. Inside, an old witch calmly tends a bubbling cauldron while the same green aura swirls through the room. In the past, Holy Order knights had once approached her respectfully, asking her to stop capturing manticores. Their leader reminded her that manticores were a protected sanctuary species. She had no patience for that argument. She made it clear that if they wanted her cooperation, they should stop lecturing her while she worked. Confident in her own power, she mocked the idea that anyone there could force her to comply. Instead, she kept brewing her fall concoction, pleased with the spirit dumplings she was making. Back in the present, the group identifies the cottage's owner as a herbalist. The boy clarifies that she is Mani Campbell, a famous botanical sorcerer. He explains that she controls plants and also creates lethal drugs, including the binding mist around the house. Hearing that she can make potent poison, the older man decides they have found exactly the person they need to hunt the manticore. The knights are immediately overwhelmed by the stench surrounding her home. The boy catches the scent too and realizes something important about it. Even so, the party advances toward the cottage through the drifting magical haze. Mani greets the approaching warriors with delight, having apparently been expecting soldiers from Santiago. The older man recognizes her at once despite the smell and the mist. She welcomes them inside with unsettling cheer. Once they enter, she proudly presents the feast she has prepared in her cauldron. The interior is packed with herbs and ingredients, confirming that the whole place is her workshop as much as her home. The knights try to endure the meal, but the odor alone nearly defeats them. When the older man suggests she does not need to prove anything, Mani insists she is simply serving food made from crops she raised herself. She adds that anyone who dislikes it is free to leave, putting the burden back on her guests. One knight tries to force himself through it, and immediately regrets it. Another can barely keep from vomiting as the fumes rise from the pot. A third finally retches, proving the meal is as punishing as it smells. Watching this, Mani briefly wonders whether she pushed her hospitality too far. Then the boy shocks everyone by eating enthusiastically and asking why the others are struggling. He identifies the dish as a rich garlic-heavy soup and seems genuinely delighted by it. Mani, stunned, checks whether he is somehow forcing himself, but he keeps eating without hesitation. He openly declares the food delicious. Mani cannot believe anyone could sincerely enjoy it. The boy doubles down, praising the garlic in particular, and reaching for another bite. He keeps eating as if this were an ordinary, satisfying meal. The others are left speechless by how completely his reaction defies theirs. Unable to contain herself, Mani grabs him and demands an explanation. She blurts out that after 40 years as a botanical sorcerer, she has never met anyone as strange as him. Her hostility abruptly turns into fascination as she asks the boy for his name. Ian identifies himself as Ian Elidus Raven, and the old witch immediately recognizes the surname. She stares at him in shock, realizing he is connected to the pyromancer Elidus. Pressing him for confirmation, she asks whether he is truly that famous mage's disciple. The tense meeting gives way to a calmer night, and she softens enough to apologize for her earlier hostility. As a peace offering, she serves the group a generous meal and invites them to eat freely. Ian, caught off guard by the kindness, admits to himself that the food is surprisingly good. Over dinner, the discussion turns to the real issue. The knights intend to hunt a manticore, and they confirm it plainly. The witch warns them that the hunt will be far more dangerous than they seem to expect. She explains that Count Katina once sent 100 hunters after the beast, and none of them survived. The elder knight remains resolute, and says he is ready to face that risk, prompting the witch to test whether his confidence is earned. He reveals that he killed a few manticores in his youth, showing this is not his first encounter with such monsters. The witch then turns her scrutiny on Ian, forcing him to consider what role he can truly play. She bluntly tells him that if Elidus had trained him personally, he would already be a complete mage. Rather than argue, Ian asks why she does not lend her own expertise to the knights instead. That question stirs his memory of his master's warning that a mage's mark carries responsibilities most people never understand. He recalls being told that once a mage enters the world's mysteries, others will inevitably seek that power. Ian decides he does not need to kill the manticore himself, but he can at least use his reputation to draw the circle of mages' attention. He reasons that if the circle hears a manticore is involved, they may send proper support to investigate. Even if they arrive too late to witness the creature, Ian believes this could open the door to future help from other mages. Having settled on that compromise, he steels himself and commits to it. The knights accept his decision, and the matter is settled for the moment. One of them immediately volunteers to accompany Ian, making it clear he will not be left to face this alone. The next day, the search begins in the forest. Ian travels with the elder knight and armed escorts, but the woods feel unnaturally unsettling from the start. As Ian worries about Lucy waiting for him back in the village, his bird familiar suddenly returns with news that it has found the target. The familiar points them toward the manticore's location, and Ian trusts its guidance at once. When the elder knight checks whether something is wrong, Ian explains that his familiar is leading them onward. The elder is impressed, recognizing that Ian's bond with the bird is an exceptional gift. Ian quietly reflects that he gained this bloodline talent by chance, not through formal magical training. As they move, he asks the elder a question that has been bothering him. He frames it carefully by asking what truly makes the manticore a monster. Then he voices the real thought behind it. If it is a monster, could it perhaps be reasoned with instead of killed? The elder does not dismiss the idea outright and briefly considers it, but the witch cuts in and insists that a manticore is not the kind of being one can negotiate with. She adds that if Ian somehow managed to summon and speak with it, she would acknowledge his achievement. Even so, she treats the idea as absurd and warns that she would sooner report his foolishness to his master than praise him for it. Ian is left deflated, realizing he is getting scolded instead of admired. Before the exchange can continue, one of the knights spots something ahead and urgently calls the other's attention to it. The group snaps into readiness as Ian turns toward the threat. In the darkness between the trees, the manticore finally reveals its presence with a pair of glowing eyes. The beast fixes its gaze directly on the party, making it clear they have already been marked as prey. Ian immediately orders the witch and his familiar to stay close to him, taking responsibility for protecting them. The elder answers him calmly, showing complete trust in Ian's judgment. Then the elder steps forward and announces that he has prepared for this encounter personally. He reveals specially made poison bolts, a weapon designed by human hands to bring down the monster. With practiced confidence, he launches the glowing projectiles toward the manticore. Ian watches in tense silence, waiting to see whether the plan will work. The poison bolts streak through the forest at high speed toward their target. In that instant, Ian's expression hardens as he senses the attack is not unfolding as expected. The manticore counters with sudden violence, and blood erupts as the ambush fails immediately. The old hunter explains that the arrows struck the beast's neck and bounced off, confirming its hide is far tougher than expected. Realizing ordinary attacks are useless, the group turns to their leader for a decision while he struggles to process the situation. Before anyone can settle on a plan, an eerie laugh descends from the darkness, and the real threat reveals itself overhead. Ian steadies himself, unnerved by the creature's mocking voice but forcing his fear down. He recognizes that the manticore is already in front of them and that there is no time to prepare poison or any careful strategy. Accepting that he has to act immediately, Ian clenches his fist and commits himself. He shouts to seize control of the encounter before panic spreads. The others freeze in surprise as Ian steps forward ahead of the armed men. The witch watching nearby is startled that the boy actually dared to act. Ian places himself alone between the soldiers and the looming monster, drawing its full attention. The manticore prowls closer and mockingly invites him to speak, amused by his nerve. Ian tries to calm the beast as if handling a wild animal, introducing himself as a mage and signaling that he means to negotiate. His attempt at a formal introduction immediately falls apart into awkwardness, undercutting his own dignity. The manticore dismisses the effort and ridicules him for treating it like some tame beast. Ian drops the pretense and bluntly asks what the creature wants, deciding directness will work better. The manticore makes clear that if Ian wants something from it, he should state his desire plainly. Ian meets its gaze and demands to hear the creature's terms. The answer comes with brutal simplicity. The manticore wants Ian's head. The forest seems to hold its breath as the threat hangs over everyone. Ian, still trying to keep the exchange under control, presses the creature to be honest about what it really wants. The manticore reveals a deeper motive, saying it wants Ian himself and intends to make him witness the slaughter of the nearby knights. That declaration shocks Ian, because the beast has suddenly spoken in the imperial tongue. The monster tempts him further, promising that the soldier's flesh will be devoured before his eyes. It sweetens the horror by offering Ian all the glory he could want if he cooperates. The bargain becomes explicit. Once Ian has used the knights to satisfy his own ambition, the manticore will kill them for him. Pleased with its own offer, the creature waits smugly for him to yield. Ian rejects the entire proposition with disgust, refusing to entertain it for even a moment. He openly insults the manticore, making it clear he will not be manipulated. His contempt escalates into a crude, unmistakable dismissal that leaves no room for negotiation. The nearby knight is caught off guard by how brazenly Ian speaks to the monster. Ian decides that if civility will not work, he will handle the creature on harsher terms. A sudden movement from above signals the manticore lunging to kill him. As it attacks, the beast mocks him again, convinced his defiance was just a death wish. Even while reacting to the strike, Ian is still fixated on the revelation that the creature knows the Imperial language. At that critical instant, the witch intervenes and orders her magic to extend. A seed or sprout is driven into the ground to trigger the spell. The planted magic flares to life in green light. Massive vines erupt upward and coil around the manticore, halting its charge and binding its body. The old hunter watches in stunned disbelief as the trap succeeds. The forest itself seems to rise around the monster, burying it under layers of living restraints. The hunter demands to know what the witch has done, only to realize she has immobilized the manticore. She matter-of-factly explains that she also restrained the knights who had been left behind, treating both problems as equally manageable. The witch brushes off his alarm, insisting the children can look after themselves. She refocuses everyone on the immediate objective. Killing the manticore comes first. The old hunter accepts the shift in priorities and prepares to move. He steps forward to rejoin the fight. Ian notices him moving and calls out, worried by the sudden change. The hunter checks whether everyone is still safe, trying to regain control of the battlefield. Ian, confused by his master's behavior, watches him closely for an explanation. From the surrounding haze, the others answer that they are unharmed, leaving the group poised for the next move against the trapped beast. Ian is jolted by the sight of death unfolding before him. Dimitri lies mortally wounded, and Ian is forced to face that his loyal follower is dying. Even as he fades, Dimitri apologizes for failing to protect Ian, and Ian refuses to accept those final words. Ian steadies himself, suppressing his grief as he looks down at the man about to die for him. He acknowledges that everyone fought as hard as they could, but that does nothing to ease the loss. The horror of seeing Dimitri die in front of him becomes unbearable precisely because Dimitri is the one person he never wanted to lose. Ian falls into bitter reflection, withdrawn as the others remain around him. At last, the truth settles in. The world he lives in is no longer a distant story to observe. This is a world ruled by monsters and constant war. The deaths he once only knew as tales have become personal. Now that cruelty and destruction stand before him as reality, he can no longer stay detached. That realization hardens into resolve. Ian steps forward, leaving passive grief behind as he moves to act. Kneeling beside Dimitri, he calls him by name as if refusing to let him slip away. Ian remembers Dimitri once telling him that if disaster came, he should pray. He recalls being told that heaven would hear him in such a moment. Dimitri had believed that promise even at death's door. So Ian decides to test that faith and begins to pray over him. He appeals directly to heaven, asking whether anyone divine is listening. Ian pleads that if the gods truly care for their followers, they should save Dimitri. He even invokes Dimitri's devotion, declaring that his king has come for him. With no certainty except desperation, Ian offers himself to whatever higher power might answer. A burst of divine light answers his plea. The onlookers can only stare as something impossible begins to happen. Life returns to Dimitri's body, and his hand reaches toward the glowing power in Ian's grasp. Ian is stunned that the miracle is actually working. Dimitri's consciousness is drawn into a radiant heavenly realm and commanded to awaken. There, a goddess appears before him in person. Overwhelmed, Dimitri realizes he is standing before a true deity. He bows at once, and the goddess welcomes him calmly. Dimitri assumes he must have reached heaven after dying, but the goddess tells him his journey is not over because he still has work left in the world. Dimitri can barely process being told he must return. The goddess reaches out to send him back with her blessing. Her command is clear. He is to spread her will far and wide. She entrusts him with restoring the happiness Ian once dreamed of granting the world. Then she names Dimitri her apostle, binding him to that mission. That charge is declared to be her divine wish. Dimitri's awareness snaps back to his body. The others realize he has opened his eyes and called to him in disbelief. Dazed but alive, Dimitri sits up and struggles to understand where he is. Ian answers him directly, grounding him back in the world. Trying to lighten the impossible moment, Ian jokes about how it feels to return from the dead. Dimitri lunges at him in emotional confusion, and Ian is caught off guard by the sudden outburst. Through tears, Dimitri concludes that Ian saved him because the goddess herself ordered it. Ian can only smile awkwardly, relieved but unsure how to handle such devotion. He remembers the goddess's words and realizes she has chosen Dimitri for a greater purpose. So Ian explains that the goddess spared him because his role in the world is not finished. He repeats her message that Dimitri still has work left to do. That revelation leaves Dimitri completely overwhelmed as he tries to grasp that he has returned from death with a divine mission. A young mage basks in absurd praise from a kneeling believer, treating the devotion with amused confidence. Nearby soldiers, already convinced he has seen through the situation, decide to keep watching and let him act. The group gathers around him in the forest as he becomes the center of attention and authority. An older commander dismisses the fanfare as empty reverence for anyone who can avoid death. Even so, he moves the men back toward their manticore hunt, showing the expedition is still active. The mage abruptly volunteers to scout alone with his bird familiar, despite concern that he is taking an unnecessary risk. He refuses to back down and sends the familiar ahead, making clear he has already decided. The commander is left puzzled by the confidence behind that choice. The mage's thoughts reveal why. He already knows the manticore is cunning enough to bargain and manipulate. He concludes the creature cannot be left alive and must be eliminated for good. Before the hunt can continue, screams erupt from a nearby town. The manticore has already struck there, crashing into the streets and sending civilians into panic. Among the fleeing townspeople, a son desperately runs while pulling his elderly father to safety. Their escape fails when the father slips from his grasp. The son turns back in horror instead of abandoning him. He realizes too late that the beast is already upon them. The manticore looms over the fallen father, ready to kill. The son plants himself and refuses to run. He orders his father to escape, choosing to face the monster himself. Armed with only a farm tool, he denounces the creature and stands his ground. The manticore mocks the attempt, treating the man's courage as laughable. Then it offers a cruel bargain: kill his own father and bring back the head, and the rest of the humans will be spared. The offer lands like a nightmare, reducing the scene to pure shock and dread. The beast presses the temptation, presenting mass survival as the price of one life. The son rejects the bargain outright and shields his father instead. Amused, the manticore accepts his refusal and prepares to kill them both. It lunges in for the execution. Father and son cling to each other, bracing for death. At the last instant, something strikes the manticore from above and interrupts the attack. The blow lands hard enough to draw blood and force the beast off balance. A veteran fighter charges into the opening without hesitation. He crashes into the manticore with a decisive strike, driving it away from the civilians. The rescued pair realize the Holy Order of Santiago has arrived. The white-haired commander takes control immediately and orders his forces to battle. His knights move at once to engage. The manticore answers with open fury, facing the soldiers head-on. It rages at being challenged by humans it considers beneath it. From a distance, the mage casually wounds it with a shot and mocks its bluster. He judges the creature's current struggle as pathetic rather than threatening. The insult enrages the manticore, which singles him out as the real target. The mage keeps taunting it, reducing its menace to a minor injury and baiting it further. The manticore takes the bait and charges straight at him in a fury. It commits fully to a direct rush across the field, abandoning caution for revenge. The mage smiles, revealing that this reaction is exactly what he wanted. Mid-charge, the manticore senses too late that something is wrong. The mage has drawn it into a prepared position where his allies are waiting. A witch-like caster invokes wood magic and triggers the trap. Green energy surges through the ground as plant growth erupts beneath the beast. The manticore is suddenly ensnared and thrown off by the binding magic, realizing it has been caught. Seeing the trap take hold, the commander gives the order to strike now. As the battle continues, two armored fighters brace themselves amid the ruined ground, sensing another attack coming. A violent strike tears through the field, showing that the manticore is still lashing out with deadly force. The enraged beast rejects further deception and prepares to overwhelm its opponents head-on. An old mage urgently calls Ian forward, making it clear that the next move depends on him. Ian steadies himself and focuses, realizing he has to act immediately. He casts a fire spell through his staff, launching a direct attack at the monster. The flames hit hard enough to reach the creature's eye, finally breaking through its resistance. The blast engulfs the manticore in a towering inferno, forcing it into visible pain. Ian remains calm in the aftermath, showing that he has the situation under control. With the danger ended, the story shifts from battle to the town's recovery. The townspeople gather to thank the defenders, while the rescuers modestly insist they only fulfilled their duty. As the praise goes around, Ian notices he is being left out and quietly resents it. Even his crow points out the slight, and Ian can only sulk at how obvious it is. To protect his pride, he convinces himself the others are intimidated by how impressive he was. That private excuse falters when he senses someone approaching him directly. A villager personally thanks Ian for saving him, finally giving him the recognition he wanted. Ian awkwardly accepts the gratitude while pretending he was never seeking thanks in the first place. An older knight then calls Ian by name, drawing his attention to a more formal matter. The knight's repeated praise quickly becomes overwhelming, and Ian snaps in embarrassment for him to stop. Rather than taking offense, the knight becomes even more impressed by Ian's humility and character. Ian is stunned to realize his attempt to shut the man down has only raised the knight's opinion of him. Before he can recover, more armored men arrive, signaling official interest in what happened. The newcomers confirm that Ian's group are the ones who captured the manticore. They identify themselves as knights serving the castle and formally address Ian and his companion. When Ian questions why the castle is involved, he is immediately invited to accompany them. The summons is serious. Count Ration wants Ian present at the castle at once. At the castle, Ian and the others are welcomed as honored warriors rather than mere adventurers. A lavish banquet is laid out to celebrate their victory and publicly elevate their achievement. The Count enthusiastically glorifies the defeat of the monster as a noble act of justice. Ian downplays his role, but the Count treats that modesty as another admirable quality. The Count even uses Ian's success to criticize his own knights for falling short of that standard. He then reveals he has already rewarded Ian's master in advance, claiming the old mage has been compensated for Ian's efforts. Turning directly to Ian, the Count makes it clear he knows about Ian's master and has prepared something specifically for him. Ian nearly chokes in surprise, caught off guard by how personally the Count has arranged this. Still eating, Ian is told that his master is being called for, which only deepens his confusion. He realizes his master has apparently ignored the summons, leaving Ian to face the situation alone. Ian pauses and reassesses, trying to understand what the Count is really after. He covers his distraction by apologizing and claiming the food had his full attention. The Count smoothly praises Ian again and has a treasure chest brought out before him. When the chest opens, a brilliant light reveals that the reward is no ordinary gift. Inside is a golden magic scroll, an item rare enough to immediately command Ian's full attention. Its inscription explains that the moment Ian reads it aloud, the magic will activate. Ian is visibly shaken by the value and power of what he has just been handed. Examining it more closely, he realizes the scroll is of exceptionally high quality. The Count asks whether Ian likes it, emphasizing that this reward was chosen with him in mind. Ian gratefully accepts the gift, while the Count dismisses the thanks as unnecessary. The Count frames the reward as repayment for Ian bringing Lucy safely back, revealing a personal stake behind his generosity. Just as that explanation lands, someone announces a new arrival. The door opens, and the room's attention shifts toward the entrance. A young woman named Lucy enters, confirming that the banquet and the Count's gratitude have been tied to her safe return all along. The young mage stifles a laugh, and someone immediately notices his suspicious expression. At the table, he wonders what could have caused that reaction as he sits with the nobleman and the nobleman's niece. The niece hesitates, caught off guard by seeing him again after so long. She warmly acknowledges their reunion, and he awkwardly agrees that it has been a long time. An older companion teases him by asking if the woman is his lover, and he quickly denies any romantic connection. The joking gives way to business when the nobleman announces that he has a proposal for him. The niece reveals the purpose plainly: she intends to avenge her murdered mother. Her uncle asks the mage to lend his strength to that journey. He realizes this is why he was given a costly magic scroll, and notes that they only want his magical support, not his life on the front lines. He pictures himself contributing from the rear with magic while others handle the direct fighting. Seeing profit and low risk, he decides the arrangement could benefit him twice over. He modestly frames himself as merely a humble mage while signaling that he is willing to help. He formally accepts and declares that he will accompany them. 3 days later, preparations are complete, though the niece's uncle is too busy to personally see them off. Before departure, she asks an older ally to host them if they ever visit the Italian fief again. The old man agrees, and the farewell remains warm and respectful. The mage reflects that the noble household has prospered greatly since recruiting the Katina Knights. He thanks the old man, Ian, for everything, and Ian returns the sentiment. Ian invites him to visit a place called Ternaro Island someday, hinting that it would interest him. He explains that Ternaro is an island in the Coral Sea and says that mentioning Salvador there will earn them a warm welcome. That name catches the mage's attention, and he asks whether Salvador is Ian's real name. Ian confirms it, introducing himself fully as Salvador of House Orcus. The niece is startled by the significance of that name. She recognizes him as Salvador of the White Wolf, while he dismisses it as an old title not worth remembering. When the mage shows no recognition, she is shocked that he does not know the White Wolf at all. She explains that the White Wolf mercenaries once served directly under the previous emperor. Their reputation was built as an elite force centered on a master swordsman. The emperor was so impressed by that leader's deeds that he granted him the title Sword Master. Realizing who stands before her, the niece begins to identify him aloud. She blurts out the truth: Salvador himself is that Sword Master. The mage remains completely unimpressed by the revelation. His indifference baffles the others, who insist that Salvador is a living legend. Even as the title is glorified around him, he responds with flat skepticism. Salvador laughs and remarks that the mage's attitude suits him perfectly. One of the knights excitedly imagines the mage becoming the next Sword Master, turning the moment into absurd hero worship. Salvador brushes off the fuss with amused modesty. With the farewells ending, Salvador says they should be on their way and asks that his regards be passed to Elidis. A tearful subordinate begs the mage to survive so they can meet again, while the mage dryly notes that he has no intention of dying. Salvador steps forward for a more personal goodbye. He seals it with a firm handshake. The mage promises that once things settle down, he will head to the Trafaro ruins. Salvador smiles and says that means they will meet again. They part with a final wish to stay safe until then. The story shifts to the military force gathering under its banner. A commander stands before assembled troops as the departure takes on the scale of a formal campaign. That commander is Graham, the niece's uncle, now armored and severe. A memory surfaces of the niece pleading with him to punish the man who killed her mother. Her plea weighs on Graham as he recalls her calling him uncle and begging for justice. The target of that justice is a man accused of murdering his own sister and then trying to force Lucy into marriage. The campaign is revealed as a mission to stop that scheme before Lucy can be trapped in a political marriage and before the villain can seize the family's wealth. A dark-haired noble watches events unfold with cold focus, already planning to settle matters with Lucy once the current turmoil ends. Traveling beside the young mage Ian, she keeps up a light front while privately deciding that Lucy will be dealt with later. Elsewhere, a public rally erupts as supporters proclaim loyalty to Count Liberty and demand greater power for him. One armored agitator seizes the crowd's momentum and urges everyone to follow his lead. That night, the army camp settles into a brief lull behind its fortifications. Ian spends the quiet time boiling utensils over a fire. The nearby soldiers, baffled by his behavior, press him to explain what he is doing. Lucy jokingly imagines they think he is making some delicious spoon soup. Ian realizes the soldiers are gossiping about exactly that and bluntly corrects them. He is sterilizing the spoons. Lucy is left trying to make sense of the unfamiliar concept. Ian brushes it off as specialized knowledge she would not understand even if he explained it fully. The soldiers reduce his explanation to a mysterious mage trick and accept it anyway. A pair of soldiers then approach Ian more cautiously, hoping to benefit from whatever practical magic he is doing. They ask him to boil their food as well, still convinced his pot is meant for soup. Irritated, Ian snaps that the boiling is not for cooking at all. The camp continues around them, with small fires and scattered conversations filling the night. As the moment calms, Lucy brings up something she has been considering. She turns the conversation toward how Ian should be rewarded for helping her in the prison. Lucy admits she had planned to repay him with gold, but now feels that would be far too little. After thinking about what might truly please him, she reveals she has chosen something else. The reward she offers is Enrollment, a legendary magic sword. She recounts the old tale behind it. A fairy loved the first Baron of Talion and gifted him the blade, making him a hero of legend. Lucy gets carried away by the romance of the story, while Ian can only stare at her enthusiasm in disbelief. Ian dryly points out the obvious problem. If the sword is so extraordinary, why does the Talion family still hold only a baron's rank? Flustered, Lucy admits the legend is 4 centuries old and not exactly proof of present power. Ian presses further, asking where the sword actually is now. Lucy reveals that Enorisa was buried in the first baron's grave. The implication lands awkwardly between them. She spells out the consequence. If Ian wants the sword, they would have to dig up the grave. Ian recoils at the thought, unnerved that her ancestor effectively locked the weapon in his own tomb. When Ian compares it to some kind of burial time capsule, Lucy is too unfamiliar with the idea to follow the joke. Trying to stay practical, Ian notes that a magic sword would at least be valuable, though he wonders why she is not keeping it to strengthen her own position. He argues that would be better than letting title-obsessed opportunists continue to use her. Lucy quietly admits she has not yet reclaimed anything for herself, but says Ian has finally given her a chance to fight back. With trembling resolve, she insists he deserves something equally valuable in return for what he has done. Overcome with embarrassment after saying it so directly, Lucy abruptly blurts that she is speaking in the sense of a noble repaying a debt and nothing more. Mortified by her own outburst, she flees before Ian can answer, leaving him behind in confusion. Ian is left wondering if he pushed the exchange too far. Before he can dwell on it, someone calls for the mage. A soldier informs Ian that the Count has summoned him. The scene shifts from the camp to the town under the same night sky. There, a group of armed men are threatening a peasant and trying to extort food from him by force. The thugs mock the man's resistance and belittle the dispute as nothing more than a few chickens. One of them justifies the robbery by claiming he needs to eat before heading off to battle. Their swagger breaks when something above them suddenly draws their attention. They spot a crow in the tree and suspect it belongs to the mage. The bird confirms their fear by loudly announcing that its master is here. The men are stunned as they realize the crow can speak. A calm voice from nearby addresses them, signaling Ian's arrival. The extortionists stiffen in visible panic, their bravado collapsing the moment they understand who has found them. A sharp voice challenges Ian before he enters a tense meeting. Inside the dim tent, the atmosphere is quiet and serious. Ian asks the armored lord for a favor, making clear he has come with a specific request. The lord braces himself, sensing Ian is about to ask for something difficult. Ian asks him to stop the mercenaries from looting the town. The lord questions why the knights should not handle that instead. Ian explains that knights often hide abuses to protect their own standing. He implies that preserving reputation matters more to them than justice. He recalls that he once trusted Oberon and Lucy, only to learn how badly that trust had been misplaced. Even so, Ian insists that if the lord agrees to intervene, he will make the mercenaries obey. Later, Ian stands outside in thought until his bird warns him of trouble. He finds mercenaries assaulting civilians, confirming the very abuse he feared. Ian immediately condemns them and moves to stop it. The mercenaries try to laugh it off and threaten him with their master's authority, but Ian does not back down. The scene shifts as Ian reflects on how events spiraled from that moment. When he first caught the mercenaries, their fear of him made them hesitate. They were too frightened to continue openly, believing they would die if they stayed outside. At the same time, the Count and Lucy were relieved when they heard the immediate crisis had been checked. A knight then rushes in with urgent news for his lord. The report interrupts the Count and Lucy and forces them to face a larger problem. Ian is brought into the discussion as the source of an unexpected development. The knight reports that their army poses no threat to the enemy despite its size. Ian listens as the scale of the force is acknowledged but treated as meaningless. The real issue is that the army has been forbidden from entering Italian territory. Without legal entry, any advance would be branded an invasion and turn the population against them. That would let the enemy recast them not as liberators but as marauding mercenaries. Because Graham's forces have marched peacefully, the locals have had time to settle into normal life instead of fearing him. As a result, he has been able to present himself as the stable power while their side looks disruptive. With the army unable to act, morale has collapsed and some have even deserted. Ian realizes the war has taken a dangerous and unexpected turn. Pressed for a solution, the Lord asks whether looting should now be authorized anyway. Instead of answering directly, he turns to Ian and asks whether the mage has a plan to fix this. Lucy hesitates, unsure whether Ian can really solve something this large. Ian thinks it through and begins to see a possible opening. He admits it may not be impossible after all. Lucy and the Count immediately brighten, trusting Ian to come up with something. Their confidence draws attention from nearby soldiers, who start judging Ian's boldness. Some of the knights dismiss him as overconfident. Ian's idea leads him to a place within Italian territory, where he seeks a different kind of leverage. He arrives at a farmhouse and hears the owner angrily arguing inside. Ian suddenly confronts the man, startling him into silence. With soldiers behind him, Ian demands to know whether this man owns the wheat field nearby. The farmer tries to challenge him until others identify Ian as the famous mage Bleedies. Recognition instantly turns the farmer's defiance into fear. He throws himself down and begs forgiveness for his earlier rudeness. Ian studies him quietly, already focused on the real issue rather than the apology. He declares that the wheat is already doomed, leaving the farmer bewildered. To prove it, Ian drives his staff into the ground and tells the man to sense what is there. As dark power surges through him, Ian reveals that something buried beneath the field has been feeding on the land. He identifies it as the soul of the first Italian king, whose stolen land still carries a curse. A terrified man, already shaken by what he has heard, desperately asks what happened next. Ian cuts him off and begins using magic, forcing the room to focus on his account instead of the man's panic. He concentrates, preparing to reveal what he learned through a divine vision. Ian invokes the heavens and presents his knowledge as a warning meant to save everyone from disaster. His revelation spreads quickly, and people rally around the claim that a looming threat can still be survived if they act now. The witness is left stunned, realizing Ian somehow knew details he should not have known. Rumors begin circulating through Lien's territory that Ian is a chosen usurper meant to challenge the throne. As fear grows, people publicly denounce the current order and call for him to escape the coming purge by seizing power first. The message turns openly hostile, branding the emperor as the true enemy. That propaganda boosts the Count's army's morale, and Ian's supporters openly gather around him. By night, the movement has become impossible to ignore, and even those close to the camp watch the rising fervor uneasily. Soon after, Ian is summoned before the Count to answer for the unrest spreading through the army. The knights accuse him of dragging them onto a path of disgrace. When Ian demands specifics, they explain that people are saying the town is cursed because of him. The Count, clearly under pressure, worries that keeping Ian nearby will destroy their honor. Ian rejects the accusation as a lie and points out that the rumors came from others, not from him. The knights dismiss his defense outright, insisting that a mage cannot be trusted and must be deceiving them. Ian realizes they have no interest in truth and have already decided to treat him as a threat. He understands that arguing further would change nothing. Even so, he notes that the knights themselves are the ones driving this hostility. Ian stays outwardly calm, choosing not to show how much he has understood. The Count notices Ian's composure and grows uneasy, sensing that the young mage sees through the situation. Ian concludes that the Count is too dependent on his knights to oppose them. Accepting that reality, he decides there is no point forcing the issue. He politely releases the Count from responsibility, sparing him from making a choice he cannot uphold. The knights take that as a dismissal and tell Ian to leave if he finds their treatment offensive. Though they act stern, their unease shows they know they are pushing away someone valuable. Ian departs with a final warning that they should not expect his help later, whatever happens. Outside the tent, Lucy hurries after him before he can leave the camp behind. Ian stops and waits, already aware she has come to apologize. Lucy explains that the knights appeared so suddenly that she and her uncle were too flustered to defend him. She admits they failed him in the moment, not out of malice but because they were overwhelmed. Ian softens, seeing that her regret is sincere. Lucy anxiously searches his face, afraid he now resents her as much as the others. He reassures her that he is not truly angry. Ian explains that he never cared much about military merit anyway, since his real goal was simply to avoid being treated like a criminal. Lucy still worries that leaving this way will cost him his chance to earn recognition. Ian answers that the loss does not trouble him. To calm her, he gently pats her head. He tells her that as long as he is no longer treated with suspicion, that alone is enough for him. The gesture overwhelms Lucy, and her guilt instantly turns into delighted affection. She excitedly promises to help him obtain a magic sword and even imagines conquering territory for him. Ian immediately refuses to encourage that line of thinking. When her enthusiasm escalates into a marriage proposal, he rejects that too without hesitation. A few days later, the story shifts to the battlefield as mounted troops lead a larger force forward. From a high vantage point, the army advances in formation toward the enemy. Scouts report that the opposing force numbers around 400, while the commander keeps the mood light with his captain. The red-haired commander boasts confidently, invoking the fame of his blade as if victory is already assured. His expression hardens, revealing that beneath the swagger he is fully ready for bloodshed. Elsewhere, Lucy, now concealed under a hood, secretly aligns herself with the Count's side, setting up a hidden role in the coming conflict. An enemy leader dismisses the woman in his grasp as a mere prize to claim after the battle, treating victory as already decided. He reassures himself that the feared Black Knight of the East is fighting for their side, making their advantage seem overwhelming. With that confidence, he concludes that their victory is as certain as the enemy's defeat. From the opposing side, the defenders watch the enemy army begin its advance across the field. Their commander answers with open contempt, declaring that no matter how many foes come, anyone who threatens Graham will be cut down. He raises his sword and rallies his riders to meet the charge head-on. The cavalry surges forward at his command, turning the standoff into immediate battle. The clash is brutal from the first impact as mounted soldiers crash together in a spray of steel and blood. Behind the front, the Count and his attendants remain under guard while officers monitor the fight from the rear. One veteran notes that they currently hold the upper hand. Ian agrees, reasoning that their larger numbers should secure the battle if things continue normally. But a sudden sense of danger breaks his confidence before he can finish trusting that logic. The source becomes clear when a single black armored knight tears through soldiers with terrifying ease. A nearby officer identifies him as the Black Knight from the Eastern Empire, shocking Ian. The knight's presence is explained as a calculated move. He has been sent to secure victory where the battle was expected to be close. Ian immediately realizes this means the Empire has committed one of its highest assets to this field. On the front line, ordinary soldiers are helpless as the Black Knight cuts them down in passing. He keeps carving through the formation in sweeping strikes, turning the center into a slaughter. Ian recognizes that the battle is no longer unfolding according to their numerical advantage. A widening path of dead and broken riders shows the Black Knight driving straight through the middle of their army. Ian understands that if this continues, the entire defense will collapse into a crisis they cannot contain. He asks what happens if the center breaks, already fearing the answer. The officer grimly confirms that once the center falls, the enemy will reach them next. At the rear, the Count and the woman with him react in alarm as the danger suddenly feels immediate. Ian and the officer conclude that if the center retreats or scatters, the Count will become the Black Knight's direct target. The Count erupts in anger at his men's failure instead of facing the reality of the battlefield. Panicking, he orders Sir Decade to ride out alone and kill the Black Knight. Ian is stunned by the absurdity of the command. The officer beside him bitterly laments that such a reckless order had to fall to Sir Decade of all people. He explains that Decade is one of the few truly decent men in the Count's service, making the order especially cruel. Everyone understands what it means. Being sent against the Black Knight is effectively a death sentence. Ian tries to intervene, urging the Count to reconsider before sacrificing a loyal knight for nothing. Sir Decade accepts the order without protest, choosing obedience over self-preservation. Ian demands to know what Decade intends to do. Decade answers that he will carry out the Count's command and try to stop the enemy himself. Even as they speak, the Black Knight continues cutting down anyone in his path, proving how hopeless that mission is. Ian protests that charging out now would be suicide and would only leave the Count's side exposed. Decade insists that his duty as the Count's knight binds him to obey, whatever the cost. Ian knows Decade is right about his oath, but he cannot accept a pointless death disguised as loyalty. He argues that this is not protection at all, only the exchange of one life for another while wounded soldiers already litter the field. Seeing Decade remain resolute, Ian realizes the knight fully understands the futility, and is still prepared to go. That forces Ian to confront the cruelty of a world where honorable men are the ones chosen to be sacrificed. Before the decision can settle, a rider arrives calling urgently for Sir Decade and Sir Sigil. Ian realizes the messenger must have come from the shattered center that the Black Knight was attacking. The rider reports that the center has already been defeated and condemns the disgrace of the collapse. The news leaves Ian reeling, both at the defeat itself and at how quickly everything has fallen apart. Decade immediately gives Ian a new order: escort the Count and Baron Italian away from the battlefield. He declares that he will remain behind to buy them time. Without waiting for approval, Decade mounts up and commands the others to follow Ian and withdraw. Ian watches him ride off in disbelief, unable to accept that Decade may truly be throwing his life away. A knight reflects that in war, one person may be condemned as a fool for becoming the only sacrifice needed to save everyone else. As the Count's party retreats on horseback, that grim idea hangs over them while danger closes in behind. Lucy suddenly realizes Ian is about to do something reckless and tries to stop him. Ian ignores her alarm and urges everyone to move at once because the Count has already ordered a retreat. He turns his horse away from the group, making it clear he intends to separate from them. Ian orders Lucy to escape with the Count's vile son while she worries about leaving him behind. Refusing to run, Lucy insists she will stay with Sir Decade and help bring their pursuers down. Ian cuts off her protest and pushes her to focus on surviving the ambush. Lucy can only watch in panic as she realizes he is leaving despite her plea. Ian spurs his horse forward alone, committing himself to the role of decoy. Sir Decade notices Ian breaking away and calls out to him. Ian explains that he will draw the enemy off so the Count can be protected. Sir Decade rejects the plan and argues that Ian cannot handle the pursuers by himself. Ian answers with calm confidence that he is a mage and can survive on his own. Seeing Ian's expression, Sir Decade realizes this is not youthful bravado but a settled decision. He understands Ian is completely serious and will carry this through. With reluctant trust, Sir Decade admits he has been overprotective and stops trying to hold him back. He immediately redirects the troops, ordering them to chase Ian instead of the Count. As he rides off with the Count, Sir Decade entrusts the success of the retreat to Ian. Ian accepts the burden and sends him off with a brief wish for survival. Left behind, Ian watches the Count's group disappear while the enemy closes in on him. A sudden shot flashes past Ian's face, warning him that the pursuit has already begun. The projectile slams into a nearby tree, confirming the enemy intends to kill him before he can escape. His crow familiar erupts in terrified complaints, but Ian shuts down the panic and keeps control of the situation. He decides the first step is to drag the pursuers deeper into the forest, where he can fight on his terms. Ian races into the woods, and the enemy commits to following him exactly where he wants them. The forest swallows the chase, turning the pursuit into a tense hunt in the dark. The soldiers spread out and search carefully, convinced Ian came this way. They spot him waiting ahead instead of fleeing blindly, and their confidence gives way to confusion. Ian begins chanting a spell from horseback, preparing an ambush before they understand what he is doing. The soldiers hesitate, unable to make sense of the incantation until it is already too late. Ian raises both hands and releases the spell at point-blank range. A massive bolt of blue lightning tears down through the forest and detonates among the pursuers. The strike throws soldiers from their horses and shatters the formation in an instant. Ian rides past the wreckage, having turned the chase into a one-sided trap. He allows himself a brief breath of relief, believing he has thinned the enemy enough to buy time. But his thoughts return immediately to Sir Decade and the Count, and he fears they may still have been intercepted. Deciding he has to verify their safety, Ian turns back through the forest. Unseen by him, an armored enemy remains hidden behind a tree and watches him reverse course. Elsewhere in the woods, mounted soldiers continue pressing after the Count's party. One of the pursuers spots the Count ahead and realizes the real target is still within reach. Their leader orders an immediate volley to bring the Count down. Arrows rain through the forest toward the fleeing group. The barrage tears into the riders, dropping men and throwing the retreat into chaos. Sir Decade is hit but stays in the saddle, forcing himself to keep fighting through the wound. A horse rears violently as the attack breaks the group's momentum and scatters them. In the confusion, Lucy and another rider remain mounted while Sir Decade drops to the ground among the fallen. Even wounded, Sir Decade rises again, refusing to let the Count be taken. He charges into the enemy with a desperate sword stroke, trying to carve open a path. As hostile soldiers close in from all sides, Sir Decade makes his stand with Lucy and the Count behind him. A mustached noble is suddenly cut down by a violent slash before he can recover. His body crashes to the ground as armed men close in around the scene. Lucy freezes in panic, unsure how to respond, while her wounded uncle looks back at her. A mounted knight calls for the Count to surrender and prepares to force the issue. The Count erupts in fury instead of yielding. Though badly wounded, he drags himself forward to make one last stand while Lucy and her uncle watch from behind. One of the attackers recoils in fear and realizes the Count is far more dangerous than expected. The Count's counterattack lands, striking the knight before the others can react. Lucy rushes toward her uncle as the Count charges off, and her uncle calls after him in alarm. Her uncle collapses into Lucy's arms and weakly calls her by name. Lucy clings to him as he fades, unable to stop what is happening. Another knight coldly notes that the Count is dead, frustrated that they failed to take him alive. His superior reminds him their real objective was never the Count himself. The order becomes clear. The Count was only a distraction, and the woman is the true target. The knight immediately commands his men to seize Lucy. The soldiers rush her as she sits trapped beside the fallen bodies. Before they can reach her, the Count surges back into the fight and drives them away from Lucy. He pays for it with another brutal wound across the chest. Lucy watches in horror as the Count finally falls for good in a pool of blood. The soldiers keep advancing, and Lucy realizes no one is left to shield her. Desperate and ashamed of her own helplessness, she silently begs for help. Her plea stirs a dark power, and the name Darkness answers from above. A strange purple force spreads around the clearing, startling the soldiers and halting their advance. Lucy stands within the ominous aura, frightened but drawn into whatever has awakened. Before the power can fully take hold, someone grabs her arm. A blue-cloaked young man pulls Lucy into his arms and carries her away at speed. The sudden rescue leaves Lucy stunned and struggling to process what just happened. He escapes with her on horseback, breaking through the dark energy and out of the trap. The rescuer, a young man with a bird perched on his shoulder, checks their surroundings while keeping control of the escape. Lucy, now safe in his grasp, can only stare at him in dazed surprise. As they ride, he asks where the Count is, assuming he should have met them by now. Lucy quietly tells him the Count is already gone. The news hits him hard, forcing him to realize he arrived too late. He makes sure Lucy is unharmed, and she thanks him for saving her. Still confused, Lucy asks what is happening and where Sir Decade is. He explains that Sir Decade was supposed to be heading toward her, but something must have gone wrong. Lucy immediately worries that Sir Decade may also be in danger. The young man guesses Sir Decade has already gone to the river and urges them onward. He reveals the urgent reason: they must shake the Black Knights pursuing them. Lucy is startled by the name, sensing a far greater threat than ordinary soldiers. That fear is confirmed when a Black Knight appears on horseback and cuts off their route. Their horse splashes into the river as they try to keep moving despite the interception. Across the water, the Black Knight confronts them head-on and refuses to let them pass. The young man understands that being trapped here means the end of their escape. The Black Knight drops all pretense and demands the talion directly. Lucy and her rescuer tense at the demand, both realizing the pursuer knows exactly what he wants. The young man fires back with contempt, making it clear he has no respect for the knight or whoever sent him. Lucy is shaken when the knight dismisses morality entirely and treats the order as routine. She blurts out the truth that Graham murdered her parents and uncle, exposing the cruelty behind the pursuit. Even with that accusation laid bare, the Black Knight only asks whether the talion is truly worth dying for, turning the confrontation into a final choice. A pursuing knight closes in and prepares to end the chase. He declares this their final warning and orders Ian to stop and surrender Tanya. Tanya, riding with Ian, realizes how dire the situation has become. Ian keeps moving through the river while the knight bears down on them from behind. Instead of panicking, Ian quietly gives a coded command to his bird companion. The knight's horse is suddenly affected, its eyes turning ominous as the command takes hold. The mount bucks violently, throwing the armored pursuer off balance. The disruption breaks the knight's charge before he can strike. He is hurled from the saddle and crashes into the shallow water. Stunned and furious, the fallen knight demands to know what Ian has done. Ian immediately follows up by ordering his companion to take flight. As Ian and Tanya pull farther away across the water, the knight can only watch in confusion. He is still trying to understand what happened when the river itself begins to answer Ian's move. A surge of water rises up and crashes toward the knight, turning his disadvantage into a trap. He tries to run clear before the wave can engulf him. For a brief moment the riverbank falls quiet after the impact. The knight ends up sprawled in the water, defeated and barely conscious. Tanya hesitantly calls Ian's name, unsure what he intends to do next. Ian checks the fallen pursuer and asks whether the knight is dead. The possibility makes him tense, as if he has only just realized how far things escalated. He reassures himself that knocking the attacker out was justified after being ambushed. Even so, he nervously admits he was also acting to prevent another sudden attack. Deciding caution matters more than appearances, Ian moves to secure the unconscious knight. He starts by removing the helmet so he can identify who was chasing them. The reveal catches both Ian and Tanya off guard. The knight turns out to be a woman, overturning Ian's assumptions on the spot. Later that night, they make camp and keep their captive tied to a tree by the fire. The armored pursuer, now stripped of her gear, wakes up restrained and forced to face them. She tests the situation by asking if they are awake, trying to recover some control. Ian and Tanya sit by the fire with her confiscated equipment nearby, waiting for what comes next. The captive's first outrage is not her capture but the loss of her armor. Ian bluntly explains that he had no reason to trust her and disarmed her for safety. That answer leaves her humiliated at having been subdued and handled by someone she considers an enemy. Tanya takes obvious pleasure in her discomfort and tells her she deserves it. She presses the embarrassment further, mocking the woman for dressing as a man just to fight and suggesting she must enjoy the deception. Ian tries to rein Tanya in, but she keeps pushing the issue. Tanya frames the disguise as something improper and forbidden rather than practical. In her mind, it is the kind of scandal that would provoke public outrage and punishment. She gleefully points out that once people learn a knight was masquerading as a man, the woman's reputation will collapse. The captive swallows her pride and asks them to spare what remains of her honor. Tanya rejects that plea outright, arguing that a knight who extorts money has no honor to protect and is worse than a bandit. The accusation hits hard enough to make the captive snap back in anger. Ian cuts the argument short before Tanya can drive it any further. He physically stops Tanya, making it clear that he will not let the interrogation become cruelty. Tanya is startled into silence by the firmness of his intervention. Ian gently tells her to leave this to him and get some rest, and she backs down with a quiet apology. Once she steps away, Ian turns his full attention to the bound woman. He lets out a tired breath, recognizing how badly the exchange spiraled. Trying to calm the situation, Ian says they have made too much of this. The captive refuses that minimization, insisting the issue is serious because she serves the sun god and her faith forbids such exposure. The young mage unexpectedly insists that he does understand her situation, leaving the bound woman baffled. She cannot comprehend why anyone would willingly disguise themselves as a man, because the idea makes no sense to her. He points out that men sometimes dress as women too, trying to normalize what she sees as unthinkable. When she still struggles to grasp it, he jokingly compares it to costume play, which only deepens her confusion. Trying to calm her down, he urges her not to dwell on it, and instead explain why she was disguised in the first place. Faced with that question, she falls quiet and weighs whether to reveal anything. He concludes that whatever her reasons, she is clearly talented but deeply unusual, and she dryly accepts that label. Even so, she pointedly corrects him on one thing, making sure he calls her a mage. She offers to explain herself only if he treats her with the respect due a knight, because she still does not trust him. To prove her sincerity, she swears on her honor that she will not attack him. He refuses to be swayed by that oath alone, reminding her that she has not even told him who she is. Pressed for a name, she finally introduces herself as Barenka while he keeps his guard up. Her name catches him off guard, signaling that it means something important. She reveals that she is Barenka of the House of Metz. She begins explaining that her homeland lies in a barren eastern region of the empire. As the eldest daughter, she had been raised from childhood to inherit the family, until her father died and her younger brother was chosen instead. She fought to reclaim the position she believed was hers. That struggle ended in defeat at trial, and she was cast out into exile. He follows the story to its practical consequence and asks why, if she was once so highborn, she has ended up here. Her answer is simple: she fled, which surprises him because it sounds reckless. She remains confident that no one will catch her. Her confidence comes from a destination she believes will protect her, the kingdom of Roland. The name Roland immediately grabs his attention. She explains that Roland is where her father once served as a knight in his youth. She believes that if she reaches his former lord there, her father's old ties will secure her shelter. He outwardly accepts the logic, though he is clearly judging how naive that hope is. Privately, he concludes that she is trusting too much in a decades-old connection. She senses his skepticism, and the tension between them sharpens again. When he circles back to her disguise, she becomes flustered and struggles to explain herself. He bluntly wonders whether she simply likes women, and she vehemently rejects that assumption. She explains that the Empire has been eliminating female knights, making her disguise a matter of survival. According to her, her father warned her years ago that female knights were in danger, and he taught her to be careful. She adds that there was another layer to the deception beyond just dressing as a man. She reveals that her helmet had been enchanted. The enchantment altered her voice whenever she wore it, which surprises him because he had not realized the disguise was magical. She explains that the armor and helmet were originally her father's, so the magic came with his old equipment. That detail gives him a new idea, and he turns his attention toward the discarded helmet by the fire. He asks if he can inspect it. She allows it, trusting him enough to let him handle the heirloom. As he examines the helmet, he realizes he cannot identify anything special just by sight. Then his system reacts to the object, signaling that it has detected something unusual. A notice appears telling him that the relevant skill cannot yet be learned. Another message explains that witnessing a more definite mystery is required to unlock new skills, making him realize this phenomenon is unlike the mysteries he has encountered before. More system prompts continue appearing as he processes the discovery. He receives an achievement for witnessing a new mystery and gains 50 bonus skill points, bringing his total to 550. Pleased by the reward, he immediately starts thinking about what useful ability he might buy next. He opens his skill list to browse his magical options. As he searches, his attention suddenly fixes on a possibility that stands out from the rest. He finds necromancy in progress, a skill that would let him converse with the dead. Staring at the glowing interface and the helmet in his hands, he realizes he may have just uncovered an entirely new kind of mystery. Bound to a tree, Barenka hears someone call her name and realizes she is no longer alone. Ian approaches with the strange helmet she had been carrying, and Barenka is caught off guard by the unexpected rescue. Ian grimly concludes that the helmet may be haunted, making the relic even more suspicious. By daylight, the danger of the night gives way to a quieter chance to talk. The three settle around the campfire, with Barenka now freed and included in their uneasy rest. Talion immediately challenges Ian, warning him not to let his guard down around their former enemy. Ian identifies himself plainly as a mage, making clear where his authority in the group comes from. Barenka asks whether the helmet is safe for her to use, hoping the relic might still be of value. Ian admits he cannot judge it properly because necromancy is outside his expertise. Even so, he advises her to use it cautiously until its true effect becomes clear, and Barenka accepts the guidance. As the conversation continues, the camp briefly returns to ordinary routine. Talion presses the practical concern that Barenka still might be dangerous, and should perhaps be restrained. Ian defends his choice by trusting Barenka's promise not to kill them, though Talion remains unconvinced. Ian admits he has doubts too, but he is still willing to take that risk. Barenka addresses them by name, showing she has already taken their measure. She reminds Talion that although they met as opponents, their clash was only business. More importantly, she acknowledges that Ian spared her life, creating a debt she cannot ignore. Knowing the timing is selfish, Barenka still decides to ask for something more. She asks whether they can put their conflict behind them and start over. Ian bluntly interprets her request as an attempt to join them. He makes it clear he has no objection, while Talion's silence shows she is far less pleased. Ian adds one condition: he will not tolerate any mistreatment of Talion. Talion privately realizes Barenka's real interest is not Ian but herself. Barenka confirms that if Talion accepts her, she would become a useful ally to Ian as well. Talion softens first, apologizing for the harsh way she spoke the day before. Barenka answers with an apology of her own, meeting that gesture seriously. Ian is left baffled as the tension between the two women suddenly shifts into mutual understanding. With the hostility lowered, Barenka formally thanks them both for the mercy they have shown her. She then insists that Ian in particular must be repaid for saving her life. Ian asks how, expecting something practical. Barenka declares that since she has nothing else to offer, she will repay him with her body, stunning him. She kneels and addresses him with complete seriousness, making clear this is not a joke. Ian recoils in alarm as she vows to remain by his side until the debt is settled. Barenka clarifies what she truly means, not herself as a lover, but her strength and blade in his service. The misunderstanding breaks, leaving Ian embarrassed and Talion startled by Barenka's pledge. Talion watches Ian struggle to process the sudden offer of loyalty. Ian hesitantly checks whether Barenka understands who he really is, suspecting she may be making this vow too lightly. Barenka answers that his status does not matter to her. She intends to stay until her debt is repaid no matter where he is headed. Ian pauses to think through what accepting a knight like her would mean. Barenka presses him for a decision, ready to follow whatever role he gives her. Ian imagines the obvious danger of traveling with a knight when mages and knights are natural enemies. He also sees the opposite possibility. If they can fight together, the combination would be formidable. In that vision, Barenka becomes exactly the kind of frontline protector a mage like him lacks. That realization settles his hesitation. Ian calls Barenka's name, signaling that he has reached a decision. He accepts her with a smile and immediately gives her a task, ordering Oberon to search for the scattered mercenaries at daybreak. A crow takes flight as Ian's familiar carries out the command. Ian watches the bird go, using it as his eyes to begin tracking the remnants of the enemy force. The crow soon locates armed mercenaries still moving through the forest. The mercenaries notice the bird and realize it may be a mage's signal, warning that someone is already searching for them. Two battered soldiers insist they need to leave, but one of them still resists the order. Their fear spikes when they imagine the Black Knight might curse anyone who crosses her. Even so, they note that despite heavy losses, about 300 soldiers still survived the battle. One of the men suddenly realizes who is standing before them. The famed Black Knight is revealed to be a woman, overturning everything they expected. She calmly introduces herself as Barenka of the County of Wince, showing she has no idea what title they are talking about. The soldiers are too stunned by her denial to process it. Convinced she is lying, they rush to accuse her outright of being the Black Knight. Barenka takes their challenge as an insult to her honor, and immediately answers it with a duel. One soldier eagerly accepts, hoping to force a confession if he wins. Instead, the duel ends instantly with him flat on the ground, completely defeated. His collapse makes it obvious just how overwhelming her strength is. The remaining soldiers panic and conclude that Barenka must truly be the Black Knight, because only that figure could wield such power. But the confrontation unexpectedly settles into peace, with one soldier even dropping to a respectful kneel before her. Ian watches the outcome and reflects that Barenka handled the situation far more smoothly than expected. Their reunion is interrupted when Sir Decade arrives with more men and asks whether they are done talking. Ian immediately recognizes him and calls out to him with relief. Sir Decade is glad Ian survived, and Ian returns the concern. Lucy also greets Sir Decade, and he is deeply relieved to see that she is unharmed. Ian quickly steers the reunion toward urgent business and says they need to talk. Before Ian can explain about the Count, Sir Decade reveals he already knows. He asks what Ian and Lucy intend to do next, while Ian turns the question back on him. Sir Decade admits he wants to bring Graham down if possible, though he sounds uncertain about how far he can go. Ian is not surprised by that answer. He recalls that if he had returned to the front lines, he would only have been sent back into another attack. That thought leads him to the real issue. The one person who can stop another offensive is Lucy. All attention shifts to Lucy as the one whose decision now matters most. Sir Decade lowers himself in front of her, treating her authority with full seriousness. He addresses her as Baroness Toulon and asks her to use her status to halt the war and spare everyone from more bloodshed. Lucy hesitates, overwhelmed by the weight of being asked to decide for everyone. Ian gently tells her the choice should be hers alone. Lucy remembers the moment she was first dragged into this conflict, with death already lying at her feet. She also remembers the red-haired enemy leader whose ambition drove the violence. After struggling to speak, she finally gathers herself. Lucy declares that she wants to reclaim both her title and her territory. Her resolve reassures both Ian and Sir Decade. Sir Decade immediately rallies his men, announcing that the Baroness has ordered them to fight. The soldiers begin preparing for war again, with Lucy now openly positioned as the cause they will follow. Sir Decade then turns back to Ian, making it clear he has another request. He asks to borrow Ian's magical strength for the coming battle, and Ian admits he was already thinking along the same lines. Sir Decade is delighted to have Ian's cooperation. He also apologizes for how his knights treated Ian earlier. When Ian accepts the apology easily, Sir Decade is relieved, though the nearby soldiers are unsettled by his friendliness toward a mage. That unease quickly turns into open protest from the men behind him. One knight argues they can still win on their own, and do not need a mage's help. Sir Decade snaps back that they have just lost a war, and have no standing to boast. The knights still insist that relying on a mage would disgrace their order, even if they are weak without one. Ian watches their pride-driven resistance without backing down. He coolly tells them that if they object to his involvement, they are free to leave. His blunt challenge shocks the knights into angry disbelief. As war looms, the soldiers reject any political maneuvering and try to shut the young mage out. He answers with open menace, warning them to stay out of his way. His hostility unsettles them, but only for a moment. They push back, insisting war belongs to knights and mocking the idea that he could win without them. The soldiers laugh off the notion that a rookie mage could lead a war effort. He coldly reminds them that their own failures already cost them the battle they were supposed to win. With a smug jab, he turns the blame on them and asks whether victory would not have been secured if they had done their jobs. The insult leaves them furious and speechless. Before the argument can explode further, an older commander steps in and takes control of the exchange. At that moment, the sky begins to churn ominously overhead. A violent vortex forms above the group, forcing everyone to recognize that something far more dangerous is beginning. The commander braces himself as the wind and pressure build around them. The nearby soldiers panic, realizing they may be caught in something beyond their control. The mage dismisses them as men who only call themselves knights. He declares that he will launch a counterattack himself, and orders only those truly loyal to him to follow. By sunset, mounted forces move out across the hills toward the next confrontation. A black-armored knight leads the advance while others notice a lone figure waiting ahead. They identify that figure as the Black Knight of the East, confirming a feared enemy has appeared. Their leader feels betrayed and realizes the situation has turned disastrous. He sounds the horn, committing his side to battle despite the shock. The cavalry surges forward in a full charge. As the horses thunder ahead, dread spreads through the attackers. The black-armored knight meets the charge head-on without yielding. The red-haired commander demands to know what is happening, then orders the attack to continue. His riders clash with the lone knight, but their assault is immediately checked. The Black Knight's counterstroke cuts through the attackers with effortless force. One rider reels in shock as he realizes how badly they have misjudged their opponent. Even while trying to reassure himself that the Baron's army is ordinary, he sees that this enemy is anything but. The Black Knight unleashes another devastating sweep. A single cold blue eye reveals absolute control and lethal intent behind the helmet. The charge collapses as riders are thrown aside and panic spreads through the line. Watching his men break, the red-haired commander can only listen to their screams. He realizes that if this continues, his entire force will die for nothing. Nearby, a young woman named Lucy watches the battle in silence as the mounted group remains on the ridge behind her. The commander hardens himself, deciding there is only one way to stop the slaughter. He resolves to kill the Black Knight personally and spurs forward. Before he can act, dark magic erupts around him under the command of Dark Mist. The mage follows with shadow arts, casting pitch-black curtain and swallowing the battlefield in supernatural darkness. From within the spreading spell, he calmly controls the chaos he has created. The trapped soldiers lose all sense of direction, unable to tell where they are or where the enemy stands. Blinded and terrified, they crash into obstacles and each other, begging not to die. The commander orders a retreat, but his authority is already slipping away in the confusion. He tries to restore order and send everyone back to their posts, only to realize the field has changed again. Looking out, he sees figures scattered across the darkened slope and can no longer make sense of the battle. His confidence breaks as he struggles to understand what kind of power has overtaken the field. Then he feels a blade at his throat and understands he has already been beaten. The black-armored knight appears at his side and orders him to drop his weapon. Faced with certain death, he can do nothing but swallow his pride. He lets his sword fall, surrendering the fight. The Black Knight remains poised and silent, having ended the battle through overwhelming force and perfect timing. At sunset, Ian stands apart from the others, quietly taking in the aftermath with a guarded calm. Something catches his attention and pulls him out of his thoughts. The young woman by the horses turns to him, hardly daring to believe the outcome. She asks if they truly won, still shaken by how suddenly everything changed. Ian answers with a small, confident smile that confirms the victory. Relief settles between them as the danger finally feels over. Around them, the battlefield shows the cost of that victory, with fallen men left where they died. The surviving soldiers have already shifted from fear to scavenging, excitedly admiring a fine sword taken from the dead. Ian watches their enthusiasm from a distance, his expression unreadable as they celebrate the spoils. That sight triggers a bitter realization in him. After killing, many people quickly reduce the dead to loot. In his mind, the scene becomes a brutal image of men carrying blood-stained trophies through a world soaked in violence. He judges that people fight not only to survive, but to seize things they desire. To him, the living often justify greed with the language of war and necessity. He concludes that beneath the excuses, much of it is simply hunger for gain. The mood snaps back when one soldier jokingly proposes turning a bracelet from a corpse into jewelry, proving Ian's point all too well. Ian reflects that he came expecting to find traces of death itself, yet he has sensed nothing of the kind. He starts to suspect his earlier assumptions about death magic and the strange necklace may have been wrong. Even so, he decides to experiment further rather than abandon the mystery. His thoughts veer into darkly absurd territory, imagining himself so exhausted he might as well lie down with the dead. The woman immediately rejects that idea, alarmed by how casually he treats something so morbid. Ian brushes it off with dry composure, as if this kind of grim thinking is exactly what his master would expect from him. A sudden movement near his staff interrupts the moment. A black bird circles overhead and descends toward him. Looking up, Ian returns to the question that has been bothering him: what it really means to be a mage. He tests his power again, wondering whether the true path of magic lies in understanding rather than simple technique. He even considers forcing a breakthrough through a harsher method, but the attempt still yields no clear answer. Standing over a glowing magic circle, he is left with uncertainty instead of revelation. The bird lands on him without fear, breaking his concentration. When it pecks at his face and coos, Ian realizes it is trying to communicate rather than attack. That small exchange gives him a sudden insight, as if the answer he was chasing has been in front of him all along. He straightens with new focus, the thought still forming as the bird settles on his shoulder. Before he can pursue it, the young woman calls him over. She cheerfully reports that everything has been handled and even checked off properly, while Ian confirms the situation is under control. She then asks about Sir Decade, and Ian learns the Knight Commander has been speaking with his men nearby. Ian turns toward the group of knights, where Decade is finishing his business before departure. The veteran knight appears relaxed now that the crisis has passed. Ian approaches with quiet resolve, ready to part on good terms. Some time later, the victory celebration in the barony comes to an end. Sir Decade and his knights prepare to leave, their duty here completed. Before going, Decade pauses, clearly wanting one last word with Ian. He finds Ian waiting beneath the tree, apart from the crowd and noise. The two part with mutual respect, agreeing that they hope to meet again. Their farewell carries the sense that this brief alliance has become something more meaningful. With the knights gone, the barony erupts into public celebration and Baron Telion is loudly praised as the victor. The young woman basks in the festive mood and teases Ian about how popular he has become with the crowd. She keeps needling him with a familiar nickname, amused by how much it bothers him. Ian inwardly fumes, convinced that this ridiculous name is some kind of curse that refuses to die. She abruptly reminds him that they need to leave soon, cutting through the celebration. Ian is confused until she points out that they had planned to visit a grave and he has apparently forgotten. The reminder hits him at once, and he realizes with dismay exactly what he has neglected. A strange magical disturbance stirs around a coffin deep inside a torchlit crypt. As the energy gathers over the stone lid, someone realizes this may be the grave magic they were searching for. Far above, a small party carefully makes its way along a deadly mountain path toward the site. Ian, already uneasy about the climb, worries one wrong step will kill him. When he notices Lucy leading the way, he immediately suspects she has dragged him somewhere dangerous again. Lucy cheerfully confirms it, reminding him that if he wants the reward he has to survive the trip. Ian turns to their guide for reassurance, and asks whether Lucy really knows where she is going. Lucy answers with complete confidence that they are almost at their destination. Ian regrets ever expecting caution or common sense from her. Their armored companion cuts in and reminds him that no one comes to a place like this without a reason. She declares that she is joining the mission as well. Even while insisting she only came to work off her debt, she ends up following Ian anyway. A crow's servant returns to Ian, and he asks what it found while scouting ahead. The bird reports that it checked the area from the sky. Its warning is immediate. There are people waiting ahead. Ian stiffens at the implication that others reach the graveyard first. The knight instantly recognizes that this complicates everything. From cover, she spots a camp outside the site and confirms the intruders are gathered there. Judging by the number of tents, she estimates roughly 40 people are present. Ian concludes they are grave robbers and worse, organized enough to have inside information. Lucy responds to the discovery with reckless enthusiasm and wants to charge them. She insists they should attack, but the knight points out they are hopelessly outnumbered. When Lucy presses her, the knight bluntly says rushing in would be suicide. Embarrassed and irritated, the knight reminds her that she is only human, not some invincible hero. Lucy turns to Ian instead, expecting him to produce a better answer. Ian thinks it over while his familiar waits on his shoulder. He admits he could try a large-scale spell, but the idea clearly carries risks. The knight immediately suspects he is about to attempt another absurdly dangerous form of magic. Instead, Ian asks whether they are near the Tarian graveyard and says an old legend gives him another option. Smiling to himself, he decides that frightening the robbers will be enough. Night falls over the mausoleum as his plan moves into place. Outside, the robbers grow restless because nothing has emerged from the tomb. One of them notices movement among the others and starts to pay attention. He finds a companion crouched on the ground doing something strange. The man explains that he is drawing holy symbols as protection. He says the marks are a charm meant to keep ghosts away, revealing how uneasy the whole crew has become. Even he admits he has a bad feeling about this job. As they talk, they recall the local rumor that the first Baron Tarian was entangled with the Fairy Queen. A sudden disturbance in the night interrupts the conversation. The robbers sense something unnatural and begin to panic. One of them tries to call out, but fear is already taking hold. A dark, glowing presence spreads across the ground, and they can only stare at it in confusion. Hidden nearby, Ian quietly names the source of the phenomenon, Shadow. He commands the darkness to rise, and it swells into a towering ghost-like form. The robbers freeze as the apparition manifests inside Ian's magical domain. The shadow spirit looms over the camp, enormous and unmistakably supernatural. Terror breaks their nerve, and they cling to each other while screaming that a ghost has appeared. Even the men holding torches can only gape as the thing keeps moving. Ian drives the illusion further by declaring it Baron Tarian himself, sending the robbers fleeing in total panic. As the camp collapses into chaos, the men beg for mercy and run for their lives, convinced the dead Baron has returned from the grave. Under the moonlight, someone desperately begs for divine mercy. A man realizes with overwhelming relief that he is still alive. That hope collapses when a blade is pressed against his throat. A female knight coldly offers him a choice between surrendering the hidden culprit and dying, forcing him into panicked pleading. Terrified, he insists he has no idea who the mage inside him even is. Before she can press further, the knight recognizes Ian's arrival. She points him toward the breached entrance and identifies the target as a mage hiding within. Ian and his companions arrive, with Ian immediately focusing on the mention of a mage. Their attention is cut short when an explosion erupts from inside the structure. Amid the blast and smoke, an older man coughs his way out alive. He steadies himself before the shattered doors, relieved that breaking through the barrier was easier than expected. The survivor is revealed as Enlion Kate, a mage from the Imperial Magic University. Seeing the wreckage, Enlion notes that the Fairy Queen's barrier was meant to keep everyone out, though he had not expected it to be this troublesome. When he looks around, he realizes the person he was tracking has already vanished. He recalls that the fugitive had promised to find another route, and wonders if that plan succeeded. A sudden unfamiliar energy brushes past him, making him suspect something dangerous nearby. Before he can investigate, someone calls out to him from behind. Mud Baron, an illegitimate member of the Dibble family, approaches and asks whether the mission succeeded. Enlion ignores the pleasantries and warns that a serious problem has appeared. He bluntly reveals that intruders have entered. Those intruders are Ian and his group, now advancing together into the underground area. The story shifts to explain that Enlion had once taught at Dranheim Magic University. Although he was unsuited to teaching, the university gave him the research environment he wanted. Even so, he longed for a more adventurous life and dreamed of becoming a legendary mage through a grand journey. Frustrated with a stagnant academic life, he yearned to abandon his work and step into a new world. That desire sharpened when he overheard that some young nobles were about to stir up trouble. The rumor involved the Lord of Inquiry, who was secretly tied to the Dibble family's hidden heir. Enlion learns that the true identity behind the affair is the Dibble family's troublesome child. When he asks whether beer is involved, he is clearly listening in on a conversation that has caught his interest. He discovers the real objective. They intend to recover a treasure left behind by the late Baron of Talon. After one of them joins the guest magic gildan, a chance opens for Enlion to involve himself in the expedition. The mention of a magic sword waiting at the end of the adventure instantly hooks him. His excitement boils over, and he becomes openly desperate to see that sword for himself. Unable to resist, Enlion immediately goes to Mud Baron and secures his cooperation. That backstory catches up to the present, returning to the ruined entrance. Back in the chamber, Mud Baron asks what Enlion means by intruders, and Enlion clarifies that these are no ordinary trespassers. He shouts the real danger at last. The intruders are mages. That revelation sums up the predicament Enlion now finds himself trapped in. Meanwhile, Ian's party continues deeper into the dark underground passage. Bernica grows uneasy in the oppressive space, while the knight warns everyone to watch their footing because anything could be lurking below. Ian's staff suddenly speaks to him like an old playmate, eager to have fun again. Ian is unsettled because he has never consciously used this talking weapon before, while the staff cheerfully recalls his old habits, including sleeping and snoring. A brief memory confirms that Ian really did snore, embarrassing him as the staff keeps teasing him. Their banter is broken when Bernica screams and grabs Ian in terror. She insists something is down the corridor, while Ian first assumes it might only be grave robbers. Still shaking, Bernica insists what she saw was not human but a monster. Her panic spreads through the group as the idea of a monster suddenly dominates the moment. The knight dismisses the fear with a smirk, suggesting they are all just rattled from being underground. When Bernica asks what the creature was, the knight casually identifies it as a fairy and explains that such beings enjoy mimicking human voices. With the mystery solved, Bernica and the others finally understand what frightened them. A disembodied voice leaves the young mage reeling when he realizes someone is speaking to him directly. He quickly dismisses it as an echo, trying to steady himself in front of his companions. But the voice keeps rambling with childish malice, amused by human fear and eager to make someone else scream. He realizes ordinary science may not explain this world and starts reconsidering what he is hearing. When the others insist the sound does not belong to any fairy, he understands this is something stranger. Testing a theory, he treats the phenomenon as wind itself carrying a will. That insight triggers a new magical breakthrough for him. He acquires atmospheric magic, specifically the ability to manipulate sound through air vibrations. The others begin to grasp that the so-called mystery may truly be tied to the wind. He immediately uses his new spell to halt the transmission of the voice. The hidden speaker protests, annoyed that he has interfered and demanding to know why. Its irritation confirms he has found the right method. He pushes further and challenges the unseen presence to reveal itself. The voice eagerly accepts, treating the confrontation like a game. He answers by unleashing sound back into the space. The corridor erupts with a loud burst, and the invisible entity delights in the chaos. His companions are stunned that the impossible voice was real all along. From above, the group regathers around him as the disturbance settles into a more dangerous silence. The witnesses finally accept that the strange phenomenon truly was a mystery of the wind. Sensing the situation worsening, he warns everyone to stay alert. He detects hostile presences approaching and prepares the group for an attack. A new spell answers from the darkness as someone invokes earth magic and shakes the corridor. He immediately suspects the intruder is the mage who entered earlier. He counters at once, commanding the earth to become still and cutting off the tremor. Footsteps emerge through the settling dust, revealing the enemy at last. An older mage appears with armed men and recognizes that the boy is unusually skilled with magic. The young mage is caught off guard by the old man's identity, and the familiar-looking figure behind him. The old man tests him by asking if he is a geomancer, and he denies it despite having stopped the spell. Instead of explaining himself, he demands to know who this man is. The stranger introduces himself as Lion Kate, a mage from Grand Frisia. The boy answers with his full name and status, declaring himself the mage Ian Elidus Raven. The name Elidus shocks Lion into immediate recognition. When Lion asks if he belongs to the famed fire mage Elidus, Ian confirms she is his master. Lion reveals he had only heard rumors that Elidus had taken a disciple. He is even more astonished that this disciple has appeared here of all places. Before the exchange can continue, the man behind Lion identifies Ian by name. That man, Telian, smugly points out that Lion still has not answered why he is here. It becomes clear Telian is fixated on Ian and is steering the conversation toward him. Ian endures the attention in wary silence, already uncomfortable with where this is going. Lion finally explains that Baron Telian brought him here because he requires a treasure. Ian responds by summoning the wind again, preparing to act before they can press their advantage. He calls out Barenka's name, signaling his ally at the critical moment. Barenka lunges in immediately, launching an attack that throws the confrontation into motion.